If there was an award for worst coworker ever, who would you nominate? I was working as a cashier for a grocery store. Had an awesomely friendly boss who was always quick with a joke and great with customers. She also counted the drawers and handled the front of the store. My drawer came up $20 short one day. Never happened in the year I was working before that, and I got pushed in front of the store manager without any defense. I could pay it out of pocket or get written up. I couldn't afford the $20, so I took the write-up. Broke high school kid that had to pay car insurance. My boss goes on later and starts talking about watching out for quick change artists. Yeah, that must have been it. A customer who was being sneaky. Fast forward 3 months, and I quit because of a crappy raise. The crappy raise was because of said demerit, and I went to work elsewhere. A few months later, she was arrested and fired for stealing from the tills to feed her lottery habit. In short, nice people in authority who F you over and let you take the fall. When I was 16, I worked at Wendy's. One day, I went in to find out that I was training someone. I was working the back window, and as I'm training her, she starts filling me in on her situation. She was a recovering smack addict who'd just been released from jail for theft, and was living in a halfway house. She was also 40 years old and kept on hitting on me, asking if I'd ever been with a woman, telling me constantly how cute I was. I thought I'd have to get a new job. But 2 days later, the addiction won out and she ran out the door with $100. The funny thing was, had it just been the money, she would have just been fired. But since she ran out with the work walkie-talkie, she was charged with a felony. Those things are stupidly pricey. She just couldn't understand the four-corner press method. Easily the bisexual love triangle that I had to deal with while working at Arby's in college. One of my managers, female, had just split with her husband, so she started doing the deed with one of the kitchen hands, who was male. When that went sour, she started hooking up with one of the female employees. Ordinarily, this wouldn't be a problem, except the male kitchen witch still clearly harbored feelings, which led to some nasty shouting matches during work hours. They'd try to pull the other employees into it and get us to take sides. I was all like, "Screw you, I'm just trying to slice roast beef." Okay, this is a fake story. There's no way they actually have roast beef to slice at Arby's. Okay, I don't know if it was actual beef or not, but we definitely put something on the deli slicer. Ah, well, at least I hope your nondescript meat slicing was done in a place where you had a great view of the sheer drama ongoing before your eyes. I kind of love hearing about this sort of stuff in hospo, but at the same time, I really don't envy someone who was there in person. I was a swing manager at McDonald's in high school. We had one employee, Johnny, who just didn't want to do any work. He was in the kitchen, so his duties were to cook, prep, clean, and restock. His favorite thing to do was prep. Ask the man to make a Big Mac and you'd get the worst sandwich ever. Ask him to slice tomatoes and you'd get perfection. Anyways, one day we're really busy and I'm helping out in the basement with an inventory order. Johnny comes downstairs and his hand is sliced, like down to the bone, bleeding everywhere. It looked like he'd put his hand in the tomato slicer and just smashed it onto his hand. Thing is, he was so calm, he almost looked pleased with himself. We sent him home thinking that was that. He strolled out, said goodbye to his coworkers, and then we never saw or heard from Tommy again. That night I was sorting out all the tills to take the dailies to the safe drop at the bank. We're missing nearly $5,000 in cash from the manager's safe. Never happened before, never happened again. Don't know how he did it, really. I used to work for a full body donation facility. Like you donate your body to science. We'd cut it up and send your different parts to researchers all over the world. In this facility, we had lots of gurneys to transport the 7 or 8 bodies we received a day. We'd also cut up the bodies on the gurneys, which meant these things were disgusting. We cleaned them, but still. My coworkers and I began noticing that some of the gurneys weren't always in their rightful place when we opened shop in the morning. Immediately, you think, ghosts. Nope. Turned out 2 employees were always staying late and doing the deed on them. I am not bullcrapping you, sadly. They didn't get fired for it. They did get fired eventually when they forged letters to their welfare agent saying they got paid below a certain amount of dollars and still needed welfare, which was a lie. They signed the bottoms of the letters, each claiming to be the other's boss. The kind of people who complain about not getting enough hours week after week, but when you do schedule them the extra hours, they call out. In fairness, one of my old jobs went about this the wrong way. We'd ask for extra hours, sure, but then they'd say 20 minutes before you leave, "Do you want to work an extra 4 hours today?" No one does. I've made plans around my work schedule now. Well, you always say you want more hours, but then you turn them down when I offer them. Whoa, wait. I signed up for every bank holiday, worked 28 days of December, and I accept all overtime with advanced notice. You can't just ask me to delay my plans by 4 hours when I'm supposed to set off and meet friends and family in the next half hour. I know someone else who cries for more hours, shows up constantly late, and 2 hours ago just straight up ditched in the middle of the shift. She leaves the crew frantic, asks for shifts on the bulletin, and then never takes the ones she's offered. I share office space with a woman who's been working in our firm for 35 years now. Underneath her desk, she's got a banker's box half filled with at least 10 kilos of colourful rocks. One day, I decided to ask her about the rocks.
Oh, every time someone makes me really mad, they get a rock in my box so I can remember it.
You mean, all of these rocks represent somebody? She rummaged in the box for a second and pulled one out.
This is for the time the department secretary didn't invite me to her Christmas party, even though I gave her a present.
I picked one out at random. So who's this for?
Oh, well that one's for my…
It was for my old boss who retired circa 2003.
That witch. I told her not to hire that packy for accounting, and she got pregnant 6 months later. She should have listened to me.
I just stared at her. So, do I have any rocks? She just glowered at me for a second and then turned back to her newspaper. Maybe it's a therapy tool, so now, instead of flying into a murderous rage, she just gets a new rock. I once had a coworker who wouldn't do a damn thing if the boss wasn't in the store. If the boss wasn't there, she'd be on the store phone talking to her baby daddy, outside smoking, or out in the mall shopping. She'd do enough work to cover a 15-minute break if you complained long enough for one. However, if the boss was there, she was all over the customers like they were her new best friend and all in the boss's face saying, "Look at how well I work." I complained, naturally. He just said there was nothing he could do because he never witnessed any of the behavior. Well, one day when she was pulling her BS, another coworker and I were hit really hard with a huge rush. She was supposed to be helping with handing out orders, making fries and drinks and whatnot. Instead, she was off on the phone talking about doing the deed loudly in earshot of the customers. I had a breakdown and just started crying. I turned around and yelled at her, saying something along the lines of, "No one cares about your stupid bedroom life. Not me, not my coworker's name, and not the customers. Either get up here and do your job or just leave now." She came to, quote, help, but with the worst attitude ever. As soon as the rush died down, I booked it to the back, grabbed the cordless phone and called the boss in tears. He agreed to do a stakeout and watched her from afar. She was fired. I was given a raise, but I quit 2 months later. There was this guy who used to bring in framed photos of various exotic wildlife and show them off to everyone in the break room. He'd launch into a long story about his trip to Africa or whatever country that week's animal supposedly came from. The thing is, they were all taken from the internet and printed on photo paper. If he bought in a Siberian tiger photo, I'd Google Siberian tiger, and bam, there it was, straight from a brochure for a Mexican zoo. I hated that guy. Just needed to get that sweet, sweet attention by any means necessary, didn't he? Feels like it would be fun to call that guy out on his crap, but I guess some of us are just surviving day to day without conflict, aren't we? At a previous job, I used to eat lunch in the break room with a friendly but very conservative woman. That didn't bother me, I just avoided hot-button topics. One day, I don't remember how it came up, she said, "All the gays and N-words should be sent to Mars." I ate my lunch at my desk after that. I worked the front desk. This coworker was fired recently. She was a lady who was on night shift audit. After a year and a half of her habits, I completely reformed my schedule to the morning shift, just so I didn't have to be in contact with her like I did for the night. Night audit came in at 11 p.m. to relieve night shift, and my coworker would come in 5 minutes late on the dot. Due to an idiotic corporate policy that allowed this 5-minute courtesy, Hilton Hotel run by management company, franchised, there was nothing that the managers could do. So I and my partner are waiting with our drawers counted and drops ready for deposit as she lumbers down from the clock room. By the time she's counted her drawer and fully ready to relieve us, it's already 11:15 p.m. And it's not like we're sitting there twiddling our thumbs either, because during her leisurely preparation we're taking in money, checking in guests and constantly recounting the drawers just so we can minimize our delay in ending our shift. Otherwise, we either leave at 11:15 p.m. with everything in disorder, which isn't in my character, or leave at 11:40 or 45 p.m. She was a gosh darn awful front desk agent to boot. Mumbled to guests, was barely personable, but she survived slipping under the radar because she always met the minimum of expectations. She was fired on a technicality. She made a reservation at this hotel for her family without authorization, and I am glad she's gone. There are so many workers in the city that deserved her spot that she wastefully occupied for 7 years. We had a guy on the night shift who would clock in and then drive away and come back at the end of his shift and clock out. The manager was told multiple times but said, "I didn't see it, so I can't do anything." He did this for over a year. When I asked what was up, the manager said, "He has mama-baby issues." I'm guessing he was related to the manager or had information the manager wanted to keep quiet. I work in an engineering contracting firm. We mainly do electromechanical work from water-related projects. We had this one electrical engineer who had a major issue with the communication. I was his project engineer for one project and he would never, ever ask me anything or give me any information unless I asked for it. He'd never take on tasks unless I told him to do task X or Y. He never even communicated with the mechanical engineer, although for our projects there needs to be a lot of coordination. When we'd find out something went wrong on the electrical side, he blamed us for not giving him information, or he'd blame us for not asking him to confirm beforehand. Further, whenever I'd ask him for something over the phone, no matter how small, like confirmation or an instrument tag number, for example, he'd request that I write him an official email with the question. Needless to say, we messed up on every project he worked on. He was fired. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I once worked with a guy who genuinely believed cats could reproduce with rabbits and would argue at length about it almost every day. The first time I told him it was impossible, he searched "cabbits" on Google Images and said, "See, I told you." Maybe not the worst, but definitely the dumbest. Keep in mind, this guy was 32 years old. Dana. I can't stand Dana. Whenever you have any questions, she looks at you like you're crazy for asking. She gives you one of those looks like, "Seriously, you want me to do that?" It doesn't matter that what you're asking for is her specific responsibility. You can't ask her to do anything without her giving you grief back. She doesn't copy people on emails, so she'll go off and work on a team project with her different team while other people are doing the same thing. To top it all off, she's in marketing and unknowingly made our publicly owned company tagline a naughty bedroom joke. I still work at the company, and it would make it easy to recognize which one, so I'd rather not say right now. I know there are worse people out there, but this makes everyone's day-to-day suck. Also, she laughs like one of the hyenas from The Lion King all day. Worked with a painter who would constantly complain about anything and everything. "It's too hot, it's too cold, I've got too much work, not enough work, it's 4:30 and I have nothing prepped for the next morning, so I'm just going to send the rest of the team home and ride the clock until 5 so I can collect a larger share of the billed hours for the day. I'm going to go for lunch at 11:30 and come back at 1, and then announce to the whole shop that I'm leaving again to go let the dogs out. I love to make crude jokes insinuating that people are unspeakable act offenders or gay, or that they have to do the deed with animals, and it will be funny because I'm bigger than anyone else and I've been working here longer than anyone, so no one will do crap anyway. Someone makes a joke about me and I go crying to the owner that people are being spiteful and are out to get me." I quit after almost 2 years of hearing from that butthole. When I put in my resignation, the department head said that I had trouble working with people and that I'd upset a lot of the more senior employees in the shop. When I finally got out, I found out that Jeff had been talking crap about me to the manager the entire time that I worked there, and that he was excited to see me leave. I talked to several of the other employees a few months later, and Jeff is still talking about me. Everyone tells him to shut the F up and that he's the main reason I quit. They're all teed off because every person they've gotten to replace me has either been a complete failure or they're a total butthole. In short, this absolute jerk painter talks crap about me and everyone. Turns out everyone's teed off because he's the reason I quit. Sounds like a swell guy, totally giving tradies a bad reputation by his very existence. What a jerk. Oh god, David. I started working as a glass collector at this nightclub, and he'd been doing the job for about 6 months before me. This made him think he was essentially my boss, even though nobody had ever told him this, and despite the fact that I was clearly better at the job than him already. He'd do everything in such a stupidly overcomplicated and slow way, wasting so much time and generally causing the place to almost grind to a halt. The worst part was the fact that he seemed to have no concept of personal space though. I frickin' hate super touchy-feely people. The ones who keep telling you to do things when they have no authority over you. F you, Zach. But sometimes, I'm not saying that the guy is you, but you gotta tell them how to do things even though you've got no authority over that person. Otherwise, maybe they screw up and you have to start over from scratch. I'm totally not Zach, by the way. Tough choice. Here are the nominees. First, there's the stinker. You get within 2 meters of this woman and your nostrils will be reminding you about it for the next 8 hours. Then there was the freak. Casually mentions how much he enjoys wearing his rear end plug to work. There was the spitter. He'd hock up a loogie and spit it in his desk side bin. I sat directly opposite him and I witnessed this show 20 goddamn times a day. Then there's the butt plunderer. Casually mentions how far he's had his arm up another man's rear the previous night. This guy was mid-40s, 6'6", bald and 140 kilograms. Nightmares were had. But the winner is the bleeder. The bleeder was mid-60s and on blood-thinning medication due to a heart attack a few years earlier. Unfortunately, this resulted in the tiniest scratch or bump bleeding for hours. In a very unfortunate turn of events, he decided to purchase white chinos. The results were not pretty. And given the amount of times he handed me back blood-smeared documents, he probably takes the cake. It sounds like the freak and the butt plunderer should get together. I'm gonna go with this crazy conservative Christian guy I worked with about 7 or 8 years ago. We were account managers for a telecom company and part of a team that specialized in a specific type of product. So there were 7 of us crammed into a small room in the back. This was back when Glenn Beck only had his stupid AM talk radio show, and this guy listened to it all day. We asked him to wear headphones, but he refused. He'd say weird, sexist quotes from the Bible frequently and wouldn't let his wife work, even though she was in the pharmacy business and we only made about $12 an hour at the time. Up until this point, the craziest thing he'd done was take off June 6, 2006, aka 666, to hide in his bunker. Then one day he was served a protective order against his wife and daughter and divorce papers all on the same day. This unlocked the true craziness. He started spending all day talking on the phone to lawyers and family members, either quoting even darker Bible verses and wishing his soon-to-be ex-wife was dead, or complaining about not having a bedroom life anymore. He then started saying that God takes care of hussies like his ex-wife, and when God does it, he wants pictures of his ex's body to show his daughter what happens when women don't obey their husbands. It all came to a head over striped socks. It was a typical morning. He was on the phone complaining to someone, and a girl came in wearing striped socks. We kind of laughed about it, and we were joking with her when suddenly crazy Christian guy slams his phone down and yells, "Oh great! Because you're all laughing in the background, the judge denied my visitation with my daughter." Another lady just made the comment, "Geez, Jeff, don't go postal." To which he replied in the coldest, flattest tone I've ever heard in my life, "Oh, I won't go postal. God will kill you all, and when he does, I'll be there to take pictures of your bodies to show my daughter what happens to hussies like you." When we told the supervisor, she laughed and then said, "What did you guys say to him? You know he's going through a hard time. You all need to be more sympathetic towards him." We threatened to put a restraining order on him, so they moved him out of the room, to the first desk outside the door. We had to walk past him and still heard the Glenn Beck show. I quit shortly after that, but to this day I keep a lookout in the news for the headline, "Man mows down office building with AK in one hand and a Polaroid camera in the other." I think the "be more sympathetic" line is so that they don't have to confront the dude. One of our adult learners at our company kept hitting on me and even started bringing in knives and hiding them around the place. He number 1'd and 2'd with the bathroom door open and was generally creepy. The managers refused to expel him and said we should be more sympathetic because he was having a bad week. The dude quit of his own accord in the end after the managers relented and wrote him a letter stating that his conduct was inappropriate. The kicker was he was on the teaching assistant course. He was going to be working with young children. The funniest thing I've ever read on Reddit was one of those threads maybe a year ago. Somebody said a guy at his work would listen to Monster Mash loudly in their cubicle on a consistent basis. Not sure why, but that's hilarious to me just picturing that. It's simultaneously hilarious, but also, oh my god, even if I was in the same office as that person for 1 week, they would be my submission for this list. That big floozy Anne. My first job was at some small crappy grocery store, barely getting enough business to stay open. Anne was best friends with our manager and spent hours of the shift sitting and talking about the raunchy bedroom fun she had with her husband and taking frequent smoke breaks in between. She'd continuously use her 5-finger discount and steal anything she could get away with. One night, while her and I were forced to face the store, like pull every item on the shelves up to look all pretty, she said she was going to run to the beer store. Seeing that it was literally 10 steps away, I said fine. 3 hours later, after I'd finished and 20 minutes away from closing, she comes back half drunk. A couple of months later, she's got caught going into the computer system, changing the prices of meat so she could save money on steaks that were already on sale. In short, which of a coworker leaves for 3 hours and comes back drunk? That guy who made a major unwanted move on me. At first, he just struck me as a weird dude. He was overweight, 2 kids with his ex-girlfriend who he was still kind of with or something. I thought he was like 35, but apparently he was 26, and I was 19 at the time. He wasn't great at small talk, and he'd just tell me weird stuff all the time while I was on register. One day, he and I were on the closing shift with 2 others. While I have the last few customers in my line, he started talking to me, thus forcing me to ignore the customers for the most part. He was talking about how his baby mama saw me and him chatting after our shift last week, and she got all up in his face saying, "I know you effing that girl. I know you're effing her." To which I stood there staring at him, having no idea what to say, and I said something like, "Well, you told her we're not, right? So it's not really an issue, right?" He then spent the rest of the shift telling me why he would F me, not date me or something respectful like that. He'd do it because I seem so chill about that kind of thing. So I guess he's saying I sound promiscuous. I let him know I'm seeing someone, which was half true. So we ended up having this awkward conversation about what my boyfriend does for a living, which turns into him telling me this guy I'm seeing probably just wants me for my body and doesn't actually give a crap about me. Finally, the shift is over and I escape. I call in the next morning to check my schedule and I'm told I'm closing with him again. So I tell my boss I would rather not work another closing shift with him because he was acting inappropriately. I didn't think it would turn into much of a thing, but he essentially was told not to speak to me unless it was absolutely necessary and completely business related. My boss told me if he so much as glanced at my butt to tell her immediately and she'd fire him on the spot. I quit a few weeks later to go back to school and I heard he was fired for threatening to beat the crap out of my manager one day after he was accused of blatantly ogling a female customer's chest. So, he was a winner? What does your crazy neighbor do that made them infamous? Mine threatened to put giant signs across the wooded border between our properties if my other neighbor got into another border dispute with him. This was after stopping my excavator from doing his job, which was finishing grading the lot so that we could plant grass, and then threatening said excavator if he got over the property line. He was 50 feet away from the line and not taking down any trees. The neighbor finished his rant and then left without ever introducing himself. When he's not complaining to the cops about my neighbor, he's doing everything legally possible to annoy the cops themselves. I used to live in a little town of about 300 people where we had an elderly neighbor named Gladys. She'd routinely look near our garbage can outside and take the recyclable bottles and cans that we'd leave for her. After we cleaned out a fish tank, we put the gravel and fake plants in a bag and left it on top of the garbage can, because the can was already full. About a week later, Gladys hollered at me while I was outside to come over as she wanted to show me something. She had taken the garbage bag that we'd left and planted the fake plants along the side of her house. She said she wasn't really confident that they'd make it, but so far they seemed to be thriving. I could only nod and compliment her on her green thumb. She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard 15 feet away. Man, I felt this. My crazy neighbor took my new blueberry and raspberry bushes and stuck them in her yard. She replaced them with sticks that she found. I had a neighbor who'd sneak into my yard at night and roll up my sod. It would be laid perfectly the night before, but I'd get up in the morning and it would be rolled up just like it was when it came from the store. I finally got angry and spent the night laying by my back door with a baseball bat and a flashlight, ready to bonk the crap out of whoever it was. Sure enough, they came around 2 in the morning, and I stood up, turned the light on, and was face to face with 4 raccoons rolling up my sod, looking for bugs. I had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone, including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he'd come and drag plastic bags full of God knows what to the end of his driveway so no one could turn around in it. One time I came home and he was outside, hosing it down in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway. I wonder if this guy had the same ongoing need for clean concrete as one lady that the narrator used to bike past at 5:30 in the morning on his way to work. Every morning, this lady would be on her hands and knees, scrubbing the pavement outside her house with chemicals and everything. My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants, and meows at people who pass by. He's not dangerous at all, but he's not right in their head either. His caretakers are his parents, and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me, he just likes to be a cat, and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, although she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. We used to have someone that would do this in my old neighborhood. We still don't know who the vigilante was, but one night someone camped out and waited for him to do it again and pummeled him and left him bleeding on the street. Cue the ambulance and cop cars on the street at 3 a.m. on a Friday. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he's been doing it for years when he introduced himself after we brought the house. He also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag as a housewarming gift, but I wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard, and he really is a great neighbor. Just an older, quiet guy who keeps to himself and eats my flowers. Comes over to my yard, eats the lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads to boil and make jam. I thought that his particular foraging was interesting and quirky, so I planted a couple of raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago when we first moved in, on the side that we share. I told him to help himself to berries anytime, especially before the birds do. The bushes have gone insane, and the entire side of my house is now a summer berry haven for us to share. Having a decent relationship with the guy I share a property line with is worth some dead-headed flowers. You know, we had one a while back that had a crystal lab in the home. Crazy fights, yelling at all hours of the night, the guy would wander around the hood of his head, and once he threw a Molotov cocktail at the second-floor window at another guy who was smashing up his car, screaming, "I'll frickin' kill you, motherfricker!" Those were some interesting times. Our neighbor pulled us over pretending to be a police officer, saying that we'd somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop. I considered using my dashcam video to actually call it in, but we'd just moved, and I wasn't sure if she was the type of crazy to burn the house down or attack my dog. After chatting with the other neighbors, it turns out she's just the wannabe HOA president in my neighborhood with no HOA. So mostly harmless, just very annoying. He was hopping my fence during the day when I was gone at work to use my backyard pool. When confronted, thanks to a snitch neighbor, he claimed he had an agreement with the previous tenant that he could use the pool whenever he wanted. Guess what? I'm not that tenant. I have a bunch of security cameras now. Well, I used to have a neighbor who was legitimately mentally ill, although I don't know his actual diagnosis. His truck wouldn't start one day due to a dead battery, and he told everyone on the street that another neighbor was stealing the electricity. He knew this because of the way this guy parked his vehicle. Obviously, it was sucking electricity from the ground for his battery, which drained the car batteries near him. Many times he had run down the street and warned everyone to hide their valuables because Japan was invading. He wasn't on substances, but he did take medication for his mental illness, and everyone on our street could tell when he stopped taking it. Whenever he'd start saying completely irrational things, we'd remind him to take his meds, and he'd thank us and go home, presumably to take it. He lived alone, and he was getting older, so I think he had a hard time remembering. There were many, many more incidents. My guy jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. I told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day. I used to live in an HOA. One of the members of the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns just to annoy him. We have one who took my parents to court because he lost in our HOA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. There was this one crazy woman in my old neighborhood who used to pretend she was a cop all the time. First encountered her screaming at the post office staff because she'd arrived past the pickup time and they couldn't guarantee her letter would be in tomorrow. There was almost an hour of her just pitching a fit while they opened the other counters around her. "Do you know who I am?" and all that stuff. Second time I encountered her, she'd cornered some poor child on the bus and was telling her she'd have her arrested because she was a police officer and she didn't like the way the kid was eating a bag of crisps or whatever. Real invective stuff. I stepped in and politely asked if the child knew this whack job, at which point the lady backed off. Anyway, I guess she saw me leave at my stop because I woke up the next morning to find my garden all torn up. Total weirdo. I was dog-sitting, probably about 16 years old. My neighbor charged into the house while I was there with a gat, pointing it at my head while on the phone with the owners of the dog, claiming, "There's an intruder! Real life ain't Call of Duty. I remember you, Daniel. Frick you. Seriously." My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons like too much noise, etc. Nope. Because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt the children. My sister lives in the UK. The next door lady standing on her driveway yelling at me because acorns have fallen from a large oak tree on my property onto said driveway, demanding that I cause the tree to cease and desist from this intentional criminal activity. Okay, thus far we have kind of a balance between the mentally ill and the people who are just intensely bored or lonely, plus a cocktail of these most likely. We can only really help that the former people get the treatment and understanding they deserve, but the latter really just need to get some damn hobbies. Years ago, in rural Arizona, we shared a pond with the crazy neighbor. More sad than anything, he was in his 40s and lived with his mother in around 1988. A Vietnam veteran, he'd walk out to our shared pond with a .45 and a box of 50 rounds. He'd then absolutely unload on the pond while yelling, police his brass, and walk quietly home. This happened every 90 days for about 3 years. This woman lived next to us who needed to have the police called on her at least once a week. She'd scream at her roommate at all hours of the night, go into a drunken and sometimes substance-filled stupor, and then scream at us while tripping out as we sat in our backyard. More than once I had to kick her out of our home because she walked in unannounced, beer in hand and drunk as ever. One time I called the cops because she was screaming about killing someone and rolling around on her front lawn. Another time I received a call at work, one morning as I worked the third shift. My girlfriend informed me they had to evacuate the house because the neighbor's garage was on fire. It turned out either she or her roommate had done it while doing substances or smoking in the garage. She ended up moving away but would still walk to our house to ask for our lawnmower. She wasn't happy when I told her to get off my porch. I cared for an elderly woman for many years. She lived to the age of 93 in a crime-ridden inner-city neighborhood by being as tough and nasty as any criminal living nearby. Her oddest actions involved her incorrect belief that she owned the road in front of her house. She didn't even own a car, but she insisted that nobody park there. She'd confront them if they parked in front of her house, and if they did it again, she slashed their tires in the middle of the night. Over and over for years. She was never caught, but everyone knew it was her. She only stopped when she lost the physical strength to slash tires in her mid-80s. Then she started using spray paint on the cars. "He don't park in front of my house no more," was all the justification she needed to damage her neighbors' cars. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This older lady lives across the street from me and she's obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn, to the point that she'll come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass in the fall or any other time. She spends hours outside with the leaf blower in the fall. She'll go outside and knock on other neighbors' doors if she thinks that you have too many leaves on your grass, and then she'll come into your yard and do it herself if you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty big 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody's used that pool in at least 5 years, yet she opens it up every summer. Somehow, she likes my family and has never once yelled at us about our leaves and randomly brings things over like half-eaten gallons of ice cream and asks if we want it because she's not using them. The old lady who lived below me left me multiple cryptic letters blaming me for the birds chirping too loudly in the mornings. Not pet birds, the sparrows and things outside. This went on for months. Yes, for a brief period I did have a bird feeder. I took it down after a few months after multiple cryptic letters.
Eventually, management got involved and took her side even though bird feeders were explicitly allowed as per the lease. There were several trees nearby, including one that literally hung onto both her and my balconies. I assure you that birds existed before I set up the feeder, just as they continued to exist after. My sister and brother-in-law took over the lease 4 years ago, and they still get occasional notes from the bird lady. Apartment management has even inspected their unit to verify there's no bird feeder or any other bird-luring devices. My friends used to live in a gentrifying neighborhood near the beach in my city. They had a regular apartment, but someone bought the building in front of them, which was beach-adjacent, knocked it down and put up a few luxury homes. This crazy lady bought one. She had a 2-car garage and a driveway, and best we could tell she had 1 car. But no one was allowed to park on the street in front of her house, which was clearly marked as a public street and where other people had been parking since forever to go to the beach or because their building didn't have parking. We could see this street from their apartment. She went out and keyed any cars parked there. It took a while to figure out it was her, but eventually people saw her doing it. All the neighbors warned their friends not to park there, and people started putting up cameras to get evidence of it. Some guy with a piece of crap ugly truck started parking directly in front of her house every day just to mess with her, because he didn't care if she scratched it up. So she slashed his tires. It got to the point where every time she opened her door to walk outside, neighbors would cuss her out through their windows. One night, she went out in the middle of the night and painted the entire curb on that street red. Someone got it on video, several neighbors called the city, I think she got a talking to and a fine, and she had several insurance claims pending against her from damage to other cars, and she finally stopped. Everyone still hates her though, even new neighbors who had told the story from older residents. When I first moved in, my neighbor walked into the house unannounced. When my wife gets home, sometimes she wants to stay in her car having a phone conversation. The neighbor will come out and walk down the side of his house, checking his sprinkler controls, and look at my wife. He has 2 huge bushes he refuses to cut. It blocks our view backing out of the driveway. The fire department came by to clear trees and bushes around the fire hydrants, and he came out and yelled at the fireman, "This bush is older than you." Needless to say, I hope there are no house fires. We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage uninvited and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the frickin' audacity of some people. Well, nice of him to let you know what you were in for, and that you should probably avoid him going forward. At least you knew from that point on to brace for crazy and dive inside every time you saw him. We've had an arrangement with our neighbor for 20 years now that she can use our paddock to put her horses on. Well, she's getting up there in age, so there's been some long periods of time where she hasn't had horses on our paddock in recent times. We noticed some new horses there lately and just assumed that they're hers, except they're not, and they belong to this other crazy lady in town who through town gossip found out the paddock doesn't belong to our neighbor but belongs to us. So she goes around spreading a rumor that my mum tried to poison her horses, which is the first time any of us realize the horses aren't our neighbors. My mum then proceeds to inform said crazy lady that A. No, she didn't try to poison crazy lady's horses. B. There's nothing poisonous in our field. C. If she keeps spreading rumors, mum's going to call the cops. And D. If she ever puts her horses on our land again, mum's selling them or calling the SPCA for abandonment. Crazy lady then proceeds to become even more crazy and starts lurking outside our house, taking photos of us and our paddock, and then gets caught going up random people's driveways through our small rural town, taking photos of their kids. She's since been spoken to about this behavior by the cops, and it seems to have stopped, but damn, she is a weirdo. The stupid thing about this is that our actual neighbor is the one who has the crazy lady nickname throughout the town, purely because she prefers animals to people and comes across as a little impatient when dealing with them. But we've always got on well with her, she just isn't a people person. She stalks us. Like every time I get home, she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 minutes later getting home this time or that I'm 2 minutes earlier and then ask me why. One time, my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window with her hands and face pressed up on the glass, trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified they called me telling me to hurry up because a crazy lady was staring at them through the window. And I replied, "Oh, that's just the stalker neighbor." Yeah, it was a funny day. Not sure if this counts as crazy, but I have this neighbor who's part of a spiritual organization called Brahma Kumaris. Every time someone in the neighborhood is going through rough times, especially deaths in the family, she goes to their house and instead of offering condolences, she preaches about how they should join this organization and things will be better. She doesn't acknowledge anyone the rest of the time except the time when someone dies or a new family moves into the neighborhood, to whom she preaches and gives books written by leaders of her organization. Cult. Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago, he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's windows, the occupants got out and beat him soundly. During this, he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back, so he doesn't yell anymore. Okay, so R1 murdered another older neighbor lady, beat her to death with his bare hands. In the middle of our townhome complex. Well, it was actually her daughter and granddaughter that are my neighbors, but she was visiting them like she does every week. The next thing you know, detectives are knocking on my door, seeing if I know any information about him or the incident. The only thing I do know is that he was always arguing with other neighbors. I looked him up on Facebook after the detectives left, and he had posted he was going to kill her 30 minutes before he was going to do it. Took pictures of her car and her daughter's house and posted it on Facebook with her address saying, "I'm going to get the B word." And then it happened after the post. Got the red-headed old B word. It's just crazy to me that at 5:30 p.m. in broad daylight, just a couple of yards from my door, he killed someone and no one saw it happening. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months, I realized that she was no longer parking her car in the garage like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she had grabbed 2 2x4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with them, she didn't have an answer. Oh, and some bonus crazy neighbor stories. I drove 16 hours straight, pulled into my drive, and crashed on my couch immediately. I must have left my garage door open because I woke up to the neighbor lady shaking me to see if they'd missed my newspaper delivery that morning as well. The neighbor lady thought I didn't clean up after my dog in her front yard. I've never owned a dog, so she retaliated by walking around the neighborhood with a garbage can, picking up every bit of dog doo she could find, and dumping said bag onto my front lawn while I was standing in the front window watching. Ran up over $300 on 1 month's water bill of mine because the neighbor lady was hooking her sprinkler up to my water when I'd leave for work in the morning and would let it run all day until right before I got home from work. She'd put up an ugly orange snow fence between our yards in the fall to keep my leaves out of her yard. Me pointing out that I only had pine trees didn't dissuade her from the decision to leave the snow fence up. And day 1 I should have known something was fishy with this lady. Literally day 1. I closed on my house at 9 a.m. and had a roofing company at the house waiting for the call that I closed. We spent the day ripping off the old layers and getting bundles up on the roof for the next day. It was hot out, we were exhausted and all sitting in the front yard cooling off, when neighbor lady walked out of her house, down the sidewalk to my house, and without even acknowledging the 6 of us staring at her, and she walked in the front door and had herself a look-see. She hated dandelions. I found this out on the first year that I lived there when I noticed that my lawn was dying off in an extremely weird way. Almost as if someone was spraying weed killer on the stream setting trying to snipe dandelions from 20 feet away. That's literally what she was doing. And being the nice guy I am, I'd clean her driveway off in the winter because I had a snowblower. She'd never thank me in person, but instead she'd come over to my house after I'd finished and would leave a bag on my front doorstep that usually contained whatever expired goods she had in her pantry. Some of the standouts for me were like a dozen cans of 10-year expired Chef Boy RD, and once half a bag of wheat flour. What terrible person or rule finally made you believe in true evil? I'm a nurse. Walked into a hospice patient's room full of family fighting about inheritances and the will of their dying relative, and one of the visitors called me back into the room and asked me if there was any way to speed the process along. She asked if things would go faster if they put a magnet over the patient's pacemaker in an effort to deactivate the device. She went on to explain that they were from out of town, they'd bought tickets to a live show, and were worried about missing it. Basically, it was taking too long for their family member to die, and it was ruining their evening. All of this was within earshot of my super sweet patient. My blood was boiling. I'm not a gambler, so I don't know if these are all over the place, but the only time I've ever been in a casino, I saw a cash machine that would give you an instant second mortgage on your house. This was in Reno in 1989 at a family reunion. I stood there looking at it and realized I was standing in front of evil incarnate. Civil asset forfeiture. 25 grand was legally taken from my grandfather who has Alzheimer's but wasn't diagnosed at the time and couldn't tell the cops why he had that much money on him. It was to buy a new truck. He had forgotten. The cops just took the money and left without any charges being filed. We didn't find out until a year later when the cops sent a receipt of seizure to his house and we found it when we were cleaning. Couldn't do anything about it because the police department already spent the money. A company I used to work for went bust because the owner was staying sloppy drunk and gambling all the money away. He came in one Monday morning and told everyone to pack up their personal stuff and to just leave. I gave my notice a couple of months earlier and actually received my vacation pay and final paycheck. Nobody else got another dime and payday was supposed to be Wednesday for the last 2 weeks. I felt really bad for everyone except my piece of crap boss. He interviewed at my new company, and when they asked me about him, I suggested they not hire him. They didn't. A serial sewer relative of mine was at her best friend's funeral and was in the funeral procession when she just stopped her car suddenly. The parents of the recently deceased were in the car behind her and bumped her bumper from behind. And you know how slowly those processions drive. The woman sued the parents for back and neck injuries and won. The last postcard we got from this woman was a picture of her dancing it up in Greece. Her family won't even let her come to visit on their properties anymore for fear that she'd fall and sue them. What a piece of work. Yep, like we all know that these sorts of lawsuits in the US can happen because you guys don't have public healthcare, but my god, it's a system that lets some real monsters just litigate to exploit everyone. What a psychopath. I sell car parts. I'm a very small player in a fairly niche market which contains a couple of other small players and 2 big ones. One of the big players collapsed owing a lot of people money. It's very unfortunate, it happens. The administrators were called in and the owner issued an emotional message on Facebook saying how sorry he was, sickness in the family, very sad, etc., but not to worry, the business has 400 grand in new stock on the shelf and the administrators will sort it all out. But later, it turns out that he knew he was about to fold but continued taking people's money, even though he had zero intention or capability of supplying them. Then he transferred the second-hand parts of the business into a new business, which his father opened in the same name, at the same address. The new business also scored the website. Then he somehow worked out a deal with the administrators whereby the 400 grand in new stock was purchased by the new business for 14.5 grand because the new business would not give the administrators access to the website to identify any of these specialty parts. He apparently intends to go back into business, but since all the people he owes money to are going to get pennies on the dollar, it would be incredible if anyone trusts that family again. This is more corporate evil than anything else. We're a small business making super specialty products. Had a customer put down 30 grand, take delivery of our product, then turn around and say, "I think it'll be cheaper just to sue you than pay the remaining 30k. Of course, I thought, no way. We have all the signed paperwork and everything. 3 months later, he got to keep our product without paying us. What were the effects, you ask? Well, due to the various legal fees which we had to carry and the fact that down payments go to suppliers, my partners and I had to open up our own personal bank accounts to keep the company afloat. All of our employees got paid, but we owners had to forego our salaries until it was settled. And because word gets around, we had to deal with that too. Total bullcrap. We could have sued him for breach of contract, but what I learned through this process is that if it's less than 1 million at stake, you're going to spend more on legal fees than you'll ever recover and it's not worth the time. The whole thing was really eye-opening. On top of that, he was using the equipment to generate profits at the same time he was claiming defective goods under the UCC. It was a complete fraud top to bottom and there was nothing we could do about it. We literally found his products in stores and everything. I have no idea how that guy can look at himself in a mirror. My piece of crap uncle who sued his 74-year-old mother. Long story short, but my uncle lost the case, but it left my grandma in serious debt for the rest of her life, and he couldn't care less. I know that feeling. My grandfather was a CEO of a local steelworking company back in the Second World War era, and during the war, the need for metals skyrocketed and his company ended up making a crap ton of money. He sadly passed away in 2013 and left his wife, my grandma, his daughter, my mum, and his son, my uncle, about 600k each. My uncle burned through all of that on stuff he didn't need, 4K TVs, etc., and got himself a brand new high-end SUV kind of car, then another car, so on and so forth. Come May of 2016, he'd burned through all of his cash on useless crap and bullied my poor 90-year-old grandma into giving him more money from her share that's supposed to be for her retirement fund. Sometimes he threatens to self-delete if she doesn't give him X amount of money, exploiting her love for him to buy more crap for himself. My ex had a long list of mental health issues stemming from years of horrible treatment as a child. She's tried to self-delete several times. Twice in the 3 years we were together. Her parents have admitted her to a local clinic. She spent 3 days there. I was so shocked at what qualified as help, it was more like glorified babysitting. She came out feeling no better, but now hit with a 15 grand bill. 15 grand for 3 days of supervised TV and reading, with 2 sessions with a psychiatrist to evaluate her. That's not including the overnight stay at the hospital and ambulance, which insurance covered most but not all of. Oh, and the kicker? After her stay, the doctor prescribed her medication. 3 grand for her prescription. We thought the Walmart employee made a mistake. She ended up going to a different doctor who thankfully helped her out big time. Mental health needs to be made more affordable. She was 19 at the time and already hit with a huge bill to add to her school loans and car payment. One of my friends owes almost $50,000 in student loans that he doesn't remember even taking out. The reason he doesn't remember taking them out is because his school, which was a for-profit college that has since closed, convinced him to sign a document when he first enrolled at age 17, which essentially gave them the right to take out loans on his behalf in order to pay his tuition. They didn't really explain to him what the document was, they just got him to sign it amongst a flurry of paperwork. The school then took out several private loans with an exorbitant interest rate, and my friend just started getting letters out of the blue the year after he graduated. When he was in school, whenever these loans would show up on his student portal, they were named a confusing code number like X4357545HFY5 or something like that, and classified as financial aid. So he thought he was getting educational grants. Apparently this has happened to a lot of people, but he was told that there was nothing he can do about it, especially since the school has now closed. I'm not sure about the precise legality, but he's contacted multiple entities to discuss it, and all of them said there's nothing he can do because he signed a contract willingly. This doesn't feel like it should be legal, but the attorneys say that there's nothing they can do. He even spoke to someone who works for the private loan company. The representative felt really bad for him, helped him drastically reduce his monthly fee to a payable amount, and said that the same thing actually happened to her. She owes $10,000 and there's nothing she can do about it either. Oh my god. There are just so many ways you can get financially destroyed in the States that are either outside your control or just con schemes disguised as legitimate enterprises that are really nasty about how they trick you. It's absolutely horrifying and seems to be able to happen to anyone who can't afford an accountant on call. A cop started lecturing me after 10:30 at night for being in the park. Park curfew was 11. He kept me there until after curfew, then gave me a ticket. That's entrapment if I recall correctly. My best friend had 2 kids with his wife, and said wife then left him for her very rich boss. She and the boss wanted custody of the kids, so they used the boss's wealth to basically bankrupt my friend in legal battles. Every time the court was leaning towards a joint custody ruling, they'd introduce some new evidence or delaying tactic. Then they knew if they just kept dragging it out again and again, he'd run out of money and give up, which is eventually what happened. Now he has very limited access to his own kids, and such access as he has is routinely denied and ignored by the ex-wife because, what are you going to do about it? Do you want a legal battle like last time? A neighbor getting evicted for not paying her rent 1 month while she was in a coma in the hospital. The apartments had a super strict policy that you had to pay by the 5th online, and that if the company didn't receive payment by the 13th, including fees, they'd start the eviction process the same day. And if the amount, now including lawyer fees, wasn't paid by the 17th, you were out on your butt. I used to run a software company. I had a digital agency hire me to work on a banking contract they had, and they were losing due to their rubbish offshore development team. I went on site to the bank to save the contract, finish and delivered the software, which took just over 3 months of work. Over this time, the agency kept dragging out my invoices, paying small bits and pieces and always saying they'd pay tomorrow. After the contract was done, they declared bankruptcy, didn't pay me, and bought the rights to trade that bank contract off the debt collection agency. They started a new company and worked that contract. Since I spent 3 months working for free, it sank my business and I had to close it. Patent trolling.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A good friend of mine has trouble keeping work due to his mental illness, which is very mild autism. Fully competent, he just can't navigate the politics of most jobs. He was on job seeker payment between jobs. As part of this, he has to attend regular appointments. Talks about what interviews he's had, etc. And he recently missed an appointment. The night before, he was rushed to the hospital, and at the time of the appointment, he was lying in a table having surgery. But he hadn't told them at least 2 days before, so his payment was cut off. 2 days before, he wasn't aware of any issues, let alone ones needing surgery. Legal guardianship. Essentially having someone, either professional, family, friend, petition the court to make decisions for you. There have been cases of seniors having people show up at their door, told them they have the legal right to make decisions for them, and send them to nursing homes. Guardians can tap into their bank accounts and essentially liquefy them to nothing. All of this is legal with barely any court oversight. Google it. There are horror stories abound. Not a personal experience, but extending copyright because you want to keep profiting off of stories that you didn't come up with. Now look, Disney does make some damn good movies, but they're a horrible corporation and have, because of their copyright madness, left a massive dent in the world. I get their desire to protect the mouse, I really do, but the fact that they're ensuring nothing will ever enter public domain again to do it is unacceptable. Ticketmaster's existence is proof of true evil. A buddy of mine had a court case, I showed up for moral support, and I saw the most racist bullcrap I've ever seen. The cop had pulled over 2 young black guys for no reason, pulled his weapon on them and yelled at them to get out of the car and walk backward toward his. He put them in cuffs on the back of his car, searched their car, found nothing, so he wrote them tickets for walking on the highway. That's what they were in court for. The man explained to the judge, he forced us to walk on the highway, he was pointing a weapon at us. The judge found them guilty. It still makes my blood boil. Companies artificially raising the price of life-saving medicines just because they can. Bonus if they market it as a good thing for the people they're potentially killing. My buddy married this girl he met in college. He majored in comp sci, she did vocal performance. He earned a scholarship, she took out loans. They married, he paid off her loans, they had 2 kids, he bought a house, he was the sole breadwinner of the family, she stayed at home all day and watched the TV. She didn't clean, cook, or help him out in any way. Her family were jerks to him and pressured her to leave. She did. Now he pays massive amounts of child support and alimony. She lived off him for years and now he owes her money. Cops giving out cell phone driving tickets to little old ladies who don't even own cell phones because the cops have to meet ticket quotas. Yes, Your Honor, I did see her hold up a phone to her ear, I swear under oath. I was adjusting my hearing aid, Your Honor. I don't even own a cell phone. I'm on a very meager income and I can't afford one. Sure, you were adjusting your hearing aid. Fine stands, $350. Man, these are just getting more and more evil the further we go, huh? I'm not sure I want to proceed. What's absurd is how many judges are just approving the awful stuff that cops are entrapping people for. It's insane. What's their angle? NSF fees. You don't have enough money, so the bank charges you lots of money. Similarly, payday loans. It's really expensive to be poor. Repealing net neutrality. Whatever happened to California coming up with its own net neutrality laws? Did the federal government kill it, or did the leaders of the movement get covertly taken out themselves? My sister's boyfriend, now ex, gave her a black eye and broke her finger. She pressed charges, but he got his lawyer and pressed bullcrap charges back, so it would be too expensive for her to fight it. She ended up dropping the charges because she couldn't afford it, and he knew that. I'm working at a very fancy hotel in Europe, and a few weeks ago there was a big conference of all the biggest asset management firms, like Wells Fargo, BlackRock, and the like. They booked out a whole floor and had literal backroom meetings. 5 to 8 important guys from different companies would sit together in a locked, emptied-out hotel room for 30 minutes and do business. Remember, these are all supposed to be competitors. Only they could leave and enter. When one meeting was over, they'd mix up and meet again in a room to talk. This was happening in 20 rooms simultaneously for 3 days. They also had lots of ominous packages delivered to their rooms. I don't know what was going on exactly, but it was shady as all hell. Multi-level marketing companies. Most distributors don't even make money and are then told that they're the problem. Not the business plan or product price or quality,
Upline on plans that aren't available to the public are held up as models of success. You're encouraged to value only friends and family who are customers. If your loved ones tell you the truth, they are apparently jealous haters of the success that you haven't achieved yet. My elementary teacher took half of my recess away because I sneezed during quiet time. Eminent domain. My great-grandfather worked hard to buy 10 acres of land near what was then a small town. Then he spent his life watching the town grow and legally steal his land bit by bit for expansion purposes. By the time he died at 94, he was left with barely a quarter acre, mostly taken up by his house. The Supreme Court in Brazil insists on doing this kind of stuff constantly. Last week, they were deciding if they'd release a lot of criminals arrested by the car wash operation because they don't like the operation cleaning Brazil from corruption. Then 2 justices voted in favor of releasing 23 criminals. One of them justified the vote by saying he was worried with the prisoner costs for the state, and the other one justified his vote by saying the jails had already got too many prisoners. The first one, who was worried about how much a prisoner costs for the state, was caught calling congressmen a few days earlier to force them to increase the salaries of the Supreme Court justices. By the way, there's a bill in Congress right now extinguishing all kinds of prison sentences for criminals in Brazil. They're doing this bill to save their butts because a new government was elected to start in 2019, and they fear that this new government will send them to jail for stuff they did over the preceding years. American medical insurance companies determining that curing people is too expensive. Insurance companies denying long-term acute care benefits to patients who paid extra to have said benefit. If you're a doctor and you work for insurance companies, you're a frickin' piece of crap and everything wrong with medicine, and you've sold your soul. No doctor who dedicated their education and life to medicine should ever choose to be in a position where they receive bonuses for saving on denied care. Ever. That's when you stop being a human and a benefit to mankind. Martin Shkreli patenting and raising the price of life-saving medication. Man murders his girlfriend, dumps body in creek. Family searches for her for almost a year. He's convicted of manslaughter and gets only 5 to 7. Court forces the victim's mother to bring his children to visit him in prison. He gets out and gets custody. I didn't witness this per se, but I heard about it later in life since I was too young at the time. My father had started a cleaning business which was taking off. He'd clean carpets and do janitorial work in large industrial buildings. One of his biggest clients didn't pay him for a while and ended up owing upwards of 80 grand. My father then stopped working for them and kept insisting on getting his money. He stopped insisting after he showed up at the building one time and had a weapon pointed at his face. Apparently the building belonged to some mafia, and the guy who'd pulled a weapon on him said he'd kill him if he showed up again. My father proceeded to sue them, and they ended up winning after a long court battle because they obviously had the resources to afford amazing lawyers. My father then had to declare bankruptcy, sell the house, and ended up starting from zero again in an apartment building with my mum and I, 2 years old. This is mostly lawful evil, I guess, or illegal masquerading as lawful. I used to work for Quest, with a W, who were bought out by CenturyLink. A guy bought a no-frills landline for about $10, no long distance, no caller ID, no anything, just a landline. Why? Dial-up internet, of course. Only he failed. He called his ISP from his modem and left it on for an entire month. Turns out it was a long-distance number. He didn't know. What happened next was a 25 grand phone bill. Now, this is your average Joe working a regular job who has a tiny home. The guy has worked in an extra $10 into his budget so that he could have the internet. It's the little things in life. Only now, he's drowning. He made 2 payments of $500 apiece to try to take care of his bill, but he'd never be able to pay the whole thing off. He called me begging and even crying for help. How the system worked is whoever waived anything took a penalty. It didn't matter if it was a mistake or legit, waiving anything gave the employee waiving a penalty. And it was a sales job. Not to mention that 25 grand couldn't be waived by anyone but upper management. Nobody was willing to waive his bill, even though he'd already paid $1 grand towards it. The fact is, the company wasn't out any money. The infrastructure was already in place, they would have made a profit on his just paying his monthly bill. But nope. The way the corporation saw it was that he owed money, and therefore, no matter how it would destroy his life, he had to pay it back. However, that wasn't the main motivation. The company could write off that loss as a loss, and as such, his defaulting on his debt is more valuable. What can you do? It's currently happening to me. I've been the registered care provider for both of my parents since I was 14. I'm 34 now. My parents passed within months of each other. Well, I lived in a council property, that's UK government housing for all of my American friends, and I've been given 28 days to vacate the house. The house I've lived in my entire life. They are under absolutely no obligation to rehouse me, and the extent of the help they can offer is the number to homeless shelter charities. When my mum died, I attempted to update the tenancy to my name, but my dad took ill before I filed the paperwork, and I was told I'd need to file different paperwork to account for his illness, which was dementia. The fact that I've lived here for my entire life means nothing, and I doubt it helps me that the housing officer completely hates my guts, but that's another story. So yeah, homeless at Christmas, and all because I had the nerve to care for my parents but not list myself as a tenant. When did saying, "If you don't like it, then leave," backfire spectacularly? A former industrial job I used to have said those words verbatim during an all-hands meeting. We were understaffed, underpaid, and overworked, and everyone knew it. Instead of the 2-to-1 ratio of 2 machines to 1 operator for safety reasons, we'd have 4, 6, or 8, because people were getting paid less than most retail jobs to bust their butts in some of the most disgusting work I've ever done. You would come home covered in moldy coolant, metal shavings, and stink. Machines started breaking down because they'd never shut them down to perform maintenance on them, so we'd often have massive problems, which of course meant even more overtime to make up for the broken machines, and people started quitting. Management's response was to tell us that they expected us to work harder, because they couldn't get more help in. One of my co-workers, who generally gave no Fs, asked in front of everyone in that room why they didn't try raising the bad wages and see if they could entice people that way. The response was, "We're not having that conversation right now. If you don't like it, you can quit." Oh, buddy, was that the wrong thing to say? As soon as word got out to the other shifts, what can only be called a frickin' exodus began. We lost half of each shift within the week. I stuck around for a couple more weeks until I had a conflict with my schooling at the time, since one of my classes got out about 30 minutes before my shift, 30 minutes away. So I warned them in advance that I might be a few minutes late one week, maybe. And I got told that I needed to decide, what's more important, your school or your job? So I quit, and I giggled my butt off at the sign in the HR office that said we had an almost 80% turnover rate. Never did find out what happened to that hellhole, but I can't imagine anything good with losing that many people. The poor HR rep seemed like she was just so frickin' done with everything, and seemed so apologetic as she took my badge. Every year, the military has this event they name the Warrior Games. It's like the Olympics for men and women who were injured while serving. I'm a decent cyclist, so I was elected to represent the Marine Corps team in that event. I'm not sure where they hold the event these days, but the year I was selected, they flew us out to Colorado Springs. When I got there, I quickly realized that 99% of the Marines competing were still active duty. I'd retired a few years prior, so it was weird being around Marines again. Almost immediately after arriving, the senior leaders and officers in charge began demanding that I get my hair cut and to shave my beard. At first I laughed it off and thought they were joking. Turns out they were quite serious. The lady who was in charge of the Marine team was a major, and she took me off to the side and ordered me to get a haircut. I reminded her that I'd retired a few years prior and was no longer required to abide by active military grooming standards. Then a light bulb went off in her head, and with a smirk she said, "Well, you either get a haircut or you can go home. Your choice." So I smirked back and said, "Guess I'm flying home." They'd already pre-purchased our airplane tickets, so all I did was call Delta, explain what happened, and the lady on the other end transferred my ticket to a flight home the next day. I'd taken a few weeks off work to attend this event, so I just went back home and enjoyed my time off with my hair and beard. It must be an absolute mindfrick to a higher up in the military when they're told no by a supposed subordinate. Like, this is an environment of near total obedience. There are stories of people crashing their ships in the Navy because they were told to hold the course by their ignorant officers. So having a guy just going, "Okay, thanks, bye, F you," must have been a jolt. When I was a kid, I stayed at a friend's house for the weekend. My friend's mother was one of those parents who, at the dinner table, required their kids to eat everything on their plate come hell or high water. I'd been served way too much food and said that I can't eat it all. The mother said to me, "You can either finish your food or leave the table." I promptly left the table. This totally blew the mind of my friends and his siblings. It had never occurred to them that leaving the table was actually a viable option. When my mother picked me up the next day, my friend's mother told her what had happened and said I was the rudest little boy. I think my mother was actually quite proud of me. My boss said, "If you don't like it, try finding a job like this one with better pay and benefits." So I googled it, and now I've just had my 14th year anniversary at the new job. It's twice the pay and insane benefits. My great-grandmother is notorious for being a mean old witch. It was Thanksgiving at her house and much of the extended family were there. She started harping on my mum's cousin for something like she always does, and my mum's cousin was like, "Grandma, can't we just have a nice dinner for once?" And great-grandma was like, "If you don't like it, you can leave." And every last cousin, aunt, uncle, and all of their food disappeared to my aunt's house. They later put grandma in a home because they were tired of taking care of her when she was so viciously mean to her own children. She's still in the home, age 94. I had an insufferable supervisor once, and we'd have these 15-minute pre-shift meetings. The guy would just stand there and lord over everyone for the duration and talk about how bad we were doing. The phrase, "we suck," was one of his favorites. Finally one day, he's really on one and summons the testicular fortitude to say, "If you don't like it, there's the door." His second-in-command got up and said, "Frick this," and walked out. The guy stood there stunned for about 5 seconds and then ran out the door after him. He later ended up having some mental instability and quitting. The second-in-command is now the supervisor. I survived all these meetings by default assuming he wasn't talking to me. My husband worked at a really toxic job for a while. As staff got fired or quit, they weren't replaced to cut costs, and instead the remaining 2 employees were worked to death. Finally, the owner, who was a crappy boss and terrible businessman, called a meeting with the 2 to try and force an attitude adjustment. The employees tried to be constructive and talk about things they saw that needed to be improved upon to make things work better, and of course, this egotistical jerk owner wouldn't have it. He told them that if they couldn't handle the expectations, then they were free to leave. So they did. Both of them left immediately and never set foot in the store again. I don't think the owner was expecting that at all. He expected them to grovel and beg to keep their jobs and thank him for the opportunity to work 70-hour weeks under his tyrannical rule. My husband called me after that meeting and was so upset he could hardly tell me what had happened. He was terrified. He was so sure I'd be angry at him for quitting his job when we weren't really in a position that I could support us. I wasn't mad at all. I was proud of him for not taking the crap that was being doled out to him and doing what was best for his mental health. He's a damn good man and he deserved better. Back in the mid-90s, a coworker was under a great deal of stress. He was performing a low-skill role in a high-skill industry during tremendous crunch that was very important to the company. Entry-level stuff. More a job that's a stepping stone than a career. Despite that, he was an integral member of the team with institutional knowledge and background that couldn't be replaced overnight. Actually, it couldn't be replaced at all, as it turns out. During a team meeting to go over status, progress, and stuff, he asked our boss for some help as he was overwhelmed and simply couldn't keep up anymore. The boss said, "If you can't handle, there's the door." The guy just stood up and without a single word he walked right out. The boss ended up having to do his job until completion of the initiative. My sister had a habit of picking fights with people, and when it wasn't going her way, she'd tell them she was removing them from her life. She's done it to boyfriends, longtime friends, sorority sisters, and she's done it to me twice. The first time I rolled my eyes because she's younger than me. After the second time, my sister told me, "I'm removing you from my life, you're toxic," and unfriended me and told the family I was toxic. In reality, I just wasn't letting her be toxic, selfish, and under the influence of whatever she was on with, to me, my spouse, and my kids. So naturally, she decided it was a good idea to threaten us. I said, "Okay, fine." Per her usual routine, after a few weeks, she came around and wanted to pretend she had never said the things she said. I didn't respond. She claimed it was all a joke and she had a right to be in my kids' lives. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. I honestly don't miss her drama, and it was the best decision for my family. It highlighted how bad the generational dysfunction was in my family, and how it was expected to just overlook bad behavior and people please for everyone else's comfort. I realized that I didn't want my kids to repeat that cycle. I vowed to always put them first. I'm not popular in my wider family right now, but I've never been happier, and this was the first year I got to enjoy holidays without having panic attacks or dread. When someone walks out of your life, let them. Nobody has a right to be in kids' lives. I don't even think all parents deserve to be in their kids' lives if they behave badly enough. I don't really have any mad aunts, but I know they're a whole thing, and most people that have them would leap at the chance to never see them again. I worked at a Thai restaurant. The owner's daughter, who was manager, left town for a couple of weeks, and we realized once she left that she was stealing our tips and tipping us out way less than herself for over a year of working there with her. When she got back, we confronted her at the end of the night during her shift, since she refused to meet with us in an official group meeting, and the 4 of us servers called her out. She said, "If you don't like it, then get out or sue me." We were all 18 to 20 years old and didn't really know what to do, so 3 of us quit on the spot in that moment and walked out the door. I'll never forget the look on her face. My lecturer wanted us to have an extra class online after the exams because we'd missed a lesson during the semester. We asked him if he could at least move it to the afternoon, but he insisted it be at 9 a.m. So everyone logged into Classroom, but only 2 people were answering his questions. He then decided to take the register and everyone was present. Then he said, "I'm not forcing anyone to be here. If you don't want to participate in the lesson, go." Everyone logged out immediately except for me because I'd gone to the bathroom, and when I came back I found him calling for my name. He later logged out and sent me the PowerPoint for the lesson. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I worked third shift at Walmart, the management tried to change a shirt policy overnight. They all of a sudden decided that we had to wear the blue collared shirts and not the blue t-shirts anymore. One of the managers, named Jackie, who was a total witch, came up to my 2 friends and myself and told us that we had to go buy new shirts right then or go home. So we left. The frozen and dairy products that we were stocking didn't get done that night, and we got to go home and play Destiny all night. Next day, they never said another word about our shirts. Screw Walmart, by the way. Unless you're a World of Warcraft raider, this probably doesn't apply, but I've been in a number of raid formations, especially back in the day, where the raid leader announces some wonky loot rules that disproportionately benefit himself or his close friends. And then he'd say, "If you don't like it, then leave." And then, yeah, everyone bails. I used to be the co-owner and station manager for a small online radio station. We were all digital, so I rarely met any of our staff in person, and we were online 24/7, so if I was awake, I was pretty much always working. We had a dedicated team of assistant station managers, about 6 of them, in charge of various things, and we'd have once-weekly meetings with me, the assistant managers, and the other co-owner. None of us were paid, this was strictly a volunteer gig. It cost the co-owner and I money to keep the station on the air, but it was a labor of love. At one point, I began to get close to one of the assistant managers and we started dating. The co-owner of the station got jealous, I think, and began to give him crap about his work, demanding that he redo graphics and coding over and over and over, even when it was perfectly fine. He laid into the assistant manager at one of our weekly staff meetings and I lost it. I told him that he needed to stop his behavior or I was going to walk. "Fine," he said. "This is my station. If you don't like the way I run it, leave." So I quit on the spot, as did half of the assistant station managers, then a large number of the DJs. Within 2 years, the whole thing had to be shut down because no one could work with my former co-owner because he was a petty tyrant who had to have things his way and couldn't let people live their lives. I've never felt such petty glee as when I saw their off-the-air blog post. My mother is well known for her Christmas, Easter, or whatever holiday tantrums. She threw a particularly good one when I was about 14 and yelled the infamous title line. My uncle and aunt piled themselves, their daughter, and myself and my 5 siblings into their 4-wheel drive. We all left to go to their place, picking up KFC for lunch on the way. I don't know what kind of Christmas my mother had, but ours was pretty good in the end. I'm so glad we didn't get pulled over, though. I was the whistleblower at my workplace. I witnessed my manager mentally and physically mistreat a 101-year-old woman. I worked in a care home. I raised the alarm and staff above the manager didn't deal with things quick enough, and over worry of a bad name, because press had gotten a hold of the story, they were trying to keep it quiet and were going to allow this manager back to work on a final warning. We were a small team, about 8 of us. When they told us that, all of us reached into our bags and threw our notices at them. It was all of us or her. A week or so later, and them paying her £15,000, she was gone. The worst thing is, we were a charity home. She basically got thousands and thousands of pounds for bullying a vulnerable elderly woman. Something like this happened to me in my previous HOA, about 15 years ago now. We were at a board meeting in the HOA president's unit, and he was power tripping and trying to illegally use his power to bully a particular owner he didn't like personally. When the rest of the board wouldn't go along with what he wanted, he basically said, "Fine, I quit, get out." We did and reconvened at my unit, where we quickly decided to do the appropriate thing. Older people can be quite the jerks in my experience. New management was hired and took over scheduling from me, who was covering for a now-gone manager, without understanding any of the intricacies of scheduling. After 2 weeks, we had an all-staff meeting to address grievances based on her incredibly poor method of scheduling, and she refused to back down, dropping the famous ultimatum. Out of a staff of 40 or so employees, I think maybe half a dozen stayed. Is anyone else out there just sort of listening for the vicarious joy of quitting a crappy workplace? I feel like I dreamed of doing this sort of thing every day in any number of my service jobs. Well, I wasn't there for this one unfortunately, but my high school English class had this scenario. The senior advanced placement English teacher was notorious in my graduating class for not really giving a damn about a lot of the students. From the way I was told, they were going over quizzes, to which the teacher started going over some vague subjective response and how it was wrong. The students started arguing, and the conversation came full circle to where the teacher started agreeing with the students. Once he realized this, he started backing off that answer and correcting the students again, causing more frustration. This resulted in a student saying, "There's no point in learning this if we're wrong even if we were right at one point." Well, if there's any of you who don't find this valuable, you can stand up and leave the classroom. 2 of his 28 students remained. I was absent because I was sick, but what a sight it would have been. I had a teacher pull the old, "if you don't want to behave, you can leave my classroom" on a classmate. The whole class got up and left. Things hadn't been going well in this class since he'd started teaching us. The main problem was that he was a really bad teacher. Like, he seemed to have no knowledge of his own subject, history, or at least was incredibly bad at transferring his knowledge. We didn't have any respect for him, and he tried to keep us in line by being extremely strict, but in an unfair way. He wouldn't let anyone ask questions anymore because he could never answer them. He screamed at students if they quietly asked their neighbor for a pencil, that sort of stuff. I don't remember what my classmate did that angered that teacher, but it was something minor. We were all fed up with him, so when he told my classmate to just leave, we all did. Felt rebellious and like I was part of a bigger plan or something. It was great. We got into trouble for it, but also the teacher got fired, so it was worth it. Had my first job as a massage therapist. My friend from school also got a job there. The business was taken over by this lady who decided to also hire her friend, who hadn't even graduated massage therapy school. The owner's friend would start sessions way earlier than necessary if the clients got there early, which meant that sometimes my friend and I would sometimes have to scramble to get ready for couples massages with her. For example, my friend was still commuting and was a few minutes away, and the owner's friend tried to start having the clients get ready. It was frustrating because we'd have no time to talk to the clients before the sessions like we were supposed to. One day I politely told her that my friend wasn't there yet, so she'd have to wait to put the clients on the table until he was actually there so he could talk to his client. She got super mad and told the new owner I was being rude to her. Well, the new owner clearly got a different story to the truth and started texting me telling me I was in trouble. I didn't even find out what the actual issue was directly from her, but I knew it was because of her friend because of how quickly it happened, after I told her friend to wait to start that session. I tried to set up a meeting in person to talk about it, but she kept refusing and said we could talk about it over text. I decided I wasn't going to deal with that unprofessional behavior from a manager and walked in to tell her I quit. Turns out my friend also quit that day because of her friend's nonsense. The business owner was left with her unlicensed and uncertified friend and a stand-in that was extremely unreliable on a really full schedule. When I was in high school, I was part of an FRC robotics team. The coach decided that nobody who missed a practice during the last week of the season would be allowed to attend the tournaments. Of course, the band class had a mandatory concert during one of the meetings. So when I brought up that I wouldn't skip the graded band concert, the coach gave the ultimatum. About a third of the team got up and left, including all of the captains. The coach backed out of that really quick. At an off-campus college party, the host, a tenor voice major in the music department, started playing Wagner and Verdi operas at full blast. When those attending asked him to play something else that they'd all like, he said, "You all need to learn to like opera. If you won't give it a fair try, you can always just leave." And with that, everyone left. Grade 8 language arts class. To preface this, I was never an aggressive student, and generally the teacher's pet. The person who, if a teacher was away for the day, would be tasked in their notes to the sub to be able to assist and give them directions. 25-odd years ago, shortly after the definitive tragic school weapon tragedy at the end of the 90s. This context is critical to the story. Middle of nowhere, Alberta, a small country school. So our regular teacher was out for the day and had left a note directing the sub to ask me if she had questions about what had been covered. The sub comes in, reads notes, and opens the teacher's weekly planner. Then begins writing our words for the weekly spelling test on the board, except she opened the wrong week. Instead of the current week, she had opened the prior week. At this point, being the goody two-shoes that I was, and much to my classmates' dismay, although our teacher would have corrected us when she was back, so it wouldn't have helped them anyway, I raised my hand and politely informed her that I believed she'd gotten the page wrong as we'd previously covered this material. What happened next I couldn't make up. She lost it, started ranting about how teens in general and me specifically were a danger to her, how she didn't know who were her friends and her enemies in the class. We'd never had this sub before, by the way. How she had every right to fear for her life. She then capped it off by saying she was the teacher, and if we wanted to think in her classroom, well, there was the door, we were welcome to leave. I was never a popular child, as you can imagine, so I wasn't really expecting one of the popular kids, and my sometimes bully, to stand up collectively with everyone else, pull me to my feet, and have everyone walk out. Now, I mentioned above that we attended a small country school. There was no place to go, so we just sat in the hallway until the principal came down to chew us out for not being in class. The sub was gone by the start of the next period, and the principal taught the rest of our teachers' classes that day.
When did a surprise party result in disaster? In high school, I was responsible for keeping a friend busy while her parents set everything up at their house for the party. We get back to her house, all lights are off, she walks in the door and announces, "Oh, I have to take a huge dump." The lights turn on. Surprise! Embarrassment ensues. The person we were throwing the 63rd birthday party for was coming back from a trip with his wife, and we, 50 or more people, were in the backyard with all of the decorations set up and food. His wife texted us when they were 5 minutes away, and we all gathered to the fence gate where they'd enter. The fence was about 7 feet tall, so you couldn't see anything over it. When they entered, we all yelled, "Surprise!" and his face looked like he was about to sneeze, but instead he was having a stroke and ended up in hospital for the evening. The food was good, though. A girl I was dating in high school set up a surprise birthday party for me, but chose not to invite most of my good friends because she didn't like them. Well, they caught wind of this party and took me out for some drinks instead as their own birthday surprise. This was before cell phones, so she didn't really have a way to get in touch with me to make up a reason to get me back to her house. Halfway through the night, one of them spills the whole story, and I decide it's wise to make a rather late appearance. It was very awkward walking into a room full of her drunken friends with her crying in the bathroom, needless to say. My friend's birthday, thrown by his wife, he was recovering from a horrible car accident and was on crutches and horse-sized doses of Vicodin. He walks in and everyone yells, "Surprise!" And he slowly turns, looks at everyone in a doped-out state, and walks right back out without saying a word. One time, my mum told me that we were running low on funds, so we couldn't have a birthday party, and that the best we could do was take me to McDonald's with my friend. We'll call him Jack. We get to Jack's house, and Mum tells me that he's out at his pool. I walk over to the gate outside, and 20 people jump out and are all like, "Surprise!" I'm confused as all heck. I walk over to Jack and ask him if he's ready to go to McDonald's, and my mum had to pull me off to the side and explain it was a surprise birthday party. I'm not a smart man. Well, you know how sometimes people can be so dumb that it's sort of adorable? This is one of those moments, I feel. Good thing your mum was here to help you navigate this societal minefield. My friends, family, and co-workers planned a surprise party for me at my house. In order to give everyone time to get there and get set up, my co-workers had my boss ask me to stay late at work because we might have an emergency project to do tonight. So 5 p.m. rolls around and everyone heads home, really to my house. I sit around. 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Finally, I text the boss that I'm headed out unless she really needs me to stay. Turns out she was supposed to have me go home at 5:30 because the project didn't pan out. Since I figure my evening is shot anyway, I head to the grocery store, pick up the dry cleaning, drop off the recycling, among all my other chores. I walk into my door between 8:45 and 9 p.m. to find all of my friends, family, and co-workers drunk in my house. They were all a bit out of it to muster a coordinated surprise, but I figured it out. I ended up having a blast anyway. My friend got back from deployment. It was my job to take him out and keep him away whilst they prepared his house. We arrive, everyone jumps out, the friend reacts automatically, punching someone in the face and throwing himself out the door at the same time. 2 chipped teeth and a sprained wrist. I went to one of those surprise parties where more and more people show up to a restaurant until the whole party is there. Fun stuff, right? Turns out that a couple who were in our group of friends were in the same section having the divorce talk. And the thing is, they hadn't been invited because they fought so much that it was tough to be around them. And look at this, our friends are having a party that we weren't even invited to because we're such a miserable couple. What more proof do we need?
Nice. I went out for a romantic dinner with my then wife. She was being unusually flirty, showing a whole bunch more chest than usual, went to the restroom, brings back undies in her handbag and gives them to me, says she couldn't wait to get home, etc., etc. So we arrive back home. She tells me to meet in the basement where we have our entertainment room and TV while she changes into something for the evening. Well, needless to say, I'm rigid as hell, go down the stairs, start taking off my pants. Surprise! About 30 friends in the basement for an early surprise birthday party. I fell backwards on the stairs, could feel my heart racing, and barely covered my fortunately rapidly deflating eggplants. You know what? I'd rather have had the intended evening's activities. I didn't even end up getting any birthday whoopee. We threw a surprise party for my brother's 30th. We did such a good job planning that he didn't even have any idea it was for him. My sister's birthday was about 10 days before my brother's, so we told him we were throwing a surprise party for her. Since it was before his birthday, we figured he wouldn't suspect a thing. He didn't. We actually had him in on the planning of his own party, asked him for his thoughts on food, drinks, among other things. We had all of his best friends, the entire family, minus my sister oddly enough, and he walked through the door and we yelled, "Surprise! You idiots! I'm not my sister!" He looks around and sees all of his friends, and a few seconds later it finally registered. He was so grateful for the awesome party and he had a blast, but his initial reaction made it feel like the biggest failure ever. My boyfriend at the time and his female friend planned a surprise for me while I was at work. I was definitely surprised and overjoyed that all of my friends were at my house with cake and balloons and wine. However, after a while, I noticed that I couldn't find my boyfriend or his friend anywhere. Caught him on the porch making out with the girl who helped him set up my surprise party. He forgot I had a security camera pointed at the front door. That was not a good surprise. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to? My friend was having her art displayed at a local coffee shop. She had no idea that her artwork was being displayed and thought she was just meeting a few friends for coffee. There were a ton of us and we all waited anxiously as she walked in. She walked in saying that her dad ruined everything about 2 minutes from the shop, texting her, telling her that he wished he could have made it to her art unveiling. I have a relevant story. My friends planned a surprise party for me and they sent out a Facebook invite with specific instructions for everyone to bring funny hats and surprise me at this local bar. Then one of them accidentally invited me to the Facebook event. My girlfriend did the same thing. It was a surprise party at a karaoke bar, and they didn't turn the privacy setting off. So scrolling down my newsfeed, I found the damn event, sweetest thing ever. I played along as I could until I realized she was missing half my buddies. So I went and invited them. I let them know ahead of time of her mistake and to play along. We arrived at the bar, I act surprised, buy her a drink and tell her later in the night, and she falls laughing off the bar stool. Still the sweetest thing anyone has done for my birthday. My buddy, who does way more judo than people should, flipped his girlfriend clean over during a surprise party and broke her arm. Thought she was an intruder. Needless to say, they're married now. Was that needless to say? I think there was an equal or greater chance of that being an immediate breakup or coma. That said, I'm glad it worked out in this case. Maybe she saw him as demonstrating his value as a family defender. A few years back, we threw one for my Uncle Tommy. It was going to be at the Elks Club where he was vice president or some dumb crap like that, so we all got set up and ready to go. We were waiting and they were supposed to arrive at 6. It got to be 7:30 and we were getting worried. Turns out my aunt was taking my uncle to the park for a romantic walk and then she wanted to take him to the club and he'd be shocked as frick, but they got into this huge fight and he wanted to go home. Eventually, she did convince him to come. The excuse was that he had left his hat there and it was an expensive hat. She actually had to steal his hat in the middle of the night and drop it off at the club, so the excuse would have the truth to it. And when he walked in, he said, "Yeah, I heard her talking about this 3 frickin' weeks ago. I told the C word I didn't want a party, and here we go, a frickin' party." He knocked all the presents off the table, punched the cake, and left. He filed for divorce the next week and then moved to Florida. One of my friend's girlfriends was throwing him a surprise party at his house and invited a bunch of us. An hour or two beforehand, someone posted on her Facebook wall, "Hey, what time does the party start again?" Needless to say, the birthday boy wasn't very surprised, but at least we all had a good time. A girlfriend of mine punched her aunt in the face, broke her nose because she jumped out right in front of her when they yelled surprise. One hospital trip later, they decided not to throw surprise parties anymore. Mine was more of a I wanted to be a huge jerk moment. It was my birthday. I told my wife, let's have the friends over for barbecue. She says, okay. I spent afternoon mowing yard and setting up the patio. About an hour before people were supposed to show up, my wife said I needed to help her run to the store to get supplies. I was filthy, covered in grass and dust, sweaty as heck, so I said, just let me take a quick shower. She says we don't have time because she needs to start cooking, to take a shower when we get back. Okay, I reply, slightly irritated to have to run to the market dirty, but no big deal, right? Did I mention she's all dressed up? Well, she seemed to be dressed really nicely for a market or barbecue, but I didn't really think much of it. Hop in the car, head down the road, she's driving. We pull into an upscale restaurant parking lot. I'm like, what the frick? Then I see all of my friends' cars parked in the parking lot. Frick. Did I mention I was dirty and sweaty? Well, I was dirty and sweaty and smelly as hell. I wanted to be a jerk and throw a complete fit and go back home, but I didn't. I spent the evening in a nice restaurant with my nicely dressed wife and friends while I looked and smelled like absolute crap, pretending to have a nice time.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
My aunt had set up a surprise 40th birthday party for my uncle. Everyone, about 30 friends, neighbors, and relatives, were hiding in the basement waiting for him to come up from work. His car pulled up, he runs to his house, everyone yells, "Surprise!" and he literally craps his pants. Turns out he'd had the runs that day and really had to go boom boom. We all had to wait until he got a shower for cake. I was 9 at the time and couldn't stop laughing. Parked in the driveway because I'm dumb as frick. He pulled in and asked what the frick I was doing at his house. He figured it out and I ruined the surprise party. I was delivering a hot tub to a customer. She had bought it for her husband who had been over in Iraq training Iraqi police. She wanted it to be a surprise for him. She had me arrive exactly 10 minutes before his party. Everyone was on the back deck but me. I had my trailer backed up with his brand new hot tub and was in the process of unloading it for them. He walks through the door and everyone shouts happy birthday about the same time I popped the strap on the hot tub. The strap releasing made a loud snap followed by a heavy boom as the tailgate released. The man was suffering from PTSD. He screamed and dove back through his door, knocking his wife into the cake, and he just lay there, curled up bawling like a smack addict in rehab. My buddy's girlfriend threw him one at his apartment the day before his birthday. Everyone got in their places when we saw him pull up, waited and waited, then looked out the parking lot to see why he hadn't come in yet. He was getting a down-under kiss by some other girl in his car. Then it got awkward. When I was a DJ, the wife had planned a 45th birthday surprise for her husband. They'd rented a banquet hall, a lot of food, maybe about 150 people. The husband walked in, people yelled surprise, and he got this shocked look on his face and went off on his wife, accusing her of cheating and so on. If you can hold this kind of secret from me, then who knows what else you're doing behind my back. There was a big commotion after that. I packed up and left. There was no further party. My younger sister decided she wanted a surprise party for her birthday, so she went ahead and planned it all herself. Cake, balloons, everything. The best part was the reveal. She walked into where everyone was waiting for her early and shouted, "Surprise!" I think whether or not she's a complete narcissist on the level of Lucille Bluth kind of rests on how old this kid was. If she was like under 13, this is just a cute silly kid thing. If she's your younger adult sister, then it's a bit nuts. A buddy of mine set up a surprise party for his fiancée. She thought he was off to another state for a week for work. He came back early on her birthday and set up a huge surprise party for her at home. She usually gets home at like 6 p.m. from work, and it was already like 7 p.m. And we finally hear her coming, so we turn off the lights, and she comes home hammered with another dude she was going to take to the bedroom. Drama was all over the place. It was a huge chaotic argument, people were taking sides, my buddy was really angry and faked that he was calm, and then jumped like a cheetah. He moved out of his seat and decked the guy in the face and knocked him out. The guy deserved it. He was a pickup artist and knew she was engaged. She was just an easy catch, but still at fault, I suppose, and they ended up breaking up. Apparently, I'm so utterly oblivious that my surprise party was ruined numerous times in the weeks leading up to it. My girlfriend had set it all up weeks in advance and invited my friends, family, even co-workers. Every single group at one point or another slipped up and mentioned the party in front of me. I honestly had no clue. The day before the party, my brother was in town and had hinted that we'd have a great time tomorrow night. My girlfriend apparently cringed. Everyone was sure that I knew, but no one directly asked me. Luckily, they didn't. I was blown away when I got to the party. No one believed that I didn't know. Oh boy, I'd been talking to this girl I met through friends on MSN. She lived in the same town as me and we'd talk every day. Not on the phone though. Supposedly she was afraid of talking on the phone. Before I go any further, yes, she was real. Anyway, I kind of started to like her, and evidently maybe she did too. I say that because I got a call from her best friend. She told me that this girl always talked about me, yada yada. She invited me to her friend's surprise 16th birthday party. I came early, met her parents, her brother, her friends, and some of her extended family. They all said, "Oh, so you're John." So we get the word that she's on her way. We close the doors and hunker down. She comes through. She seemed really happy up until she saw me. She started crying and wouldn't talk to me. She hid in the back room and wouldn't come out until I left. I still don't understand. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe you're just really, really ugly. One of my roommates last year had a girlfriend who was ultimately sweet but very clingy, controlling, and an alcoholic. She decided to throw a surprise birthday party for this roommate, who we'll call Kay, and had been planning it for an entire month beforehand. She invited all of his friends, recruited me and the other roommates to help decorate the apartment and fix some food, had posters and a banner printed out, and baked a huge elaborate cake. The day of the party, he came home 4 hours early. The girlfriend was absolutely crushed and spent the next half hour screaming at him about how he had ruined everything. We finally convince her that all is not lost and finish decorating while Kay sleeps. A note about Kay: at the time he worked nights at a bar. He normally slept during the day and was awake at night, but today he had been asked to work a double shift for some reason. When he arrived home the next day, he had been up for at least 24 hours straight. Anywho, a few hours later the guests arrived and everyone was having a good time, except for the girlfriend, who was still distraught that the surprise was ruined, and Kay, who was asleep. The girlfriend gets outrageously drunk and spent an hour or so trying to get Kay out of bed to enjoy this party that she threw for him, and he wasn't having any of it. When she finally manages to drag him out of bed, he pounds a few shots, we sing happy birthday, and he passes out again. The girlfriend at this point gives up and passes out on the floor of his bedroom. So the rest of the night was spent partying with these people we didn't really know and then cleaning up. We left most of the decorations for Kay and his girlfriend to take care of in the morning, which they never did. The monstrosity of a cake the girlfriend made sat in our fridge for a week before she remembered it existed. In short, alcoholic plans surprise birthday party for her boyfriend, the surprise is ruined, both boyfriend and girlfriend pass out not 2 hours into the party, and never clean up. Oh boy, my time to shine. My mum was having a surprise party thrown for her 30th. They flew in the whole family, her parents came, the whole shebang. On the way home from work, she was driving on a mountain road and was hit head first by a truck. She was driving a VW Beetle. She was helicoptered to the hospital, needed emergency surgery on her back, and when she woke up in the hospital, they were trying to get her phone number to call the family. She couldn't remember it. So a house full of people were waiting for my mum for about 2 or 3 hours, and eventually she remembered the number. She was completely bedridden for 6 months after the incident. Crazy stuff. When I was 13, my mum's then-boyfriend wanted to throw her a surprise 40th birthday party. My job was to keep her out of the house after work or school long enough for him to set up everything and for everyone to arrive. I told her I wanted to use my saved-up allowance to take her shopping for a new purse. We were leaving the store, and as we were walking to her car, 2 men rushed by us and took off with her purse. She was happy with the party, but her worrying about having to cancel her credit cards and stuff put a damper on the occasion for sure. Okay, that is the most unique one we've had tonight. We've had people getting shocked and attacking people, relationships ending, a mixture of both, but this was the first time the surprise was ruined by a random criminal operation. I didn't see that coming. Mine was fairly simple as far as these stories go. The guest just wasn't surprised. We threw a surprise party for a coworker of mine. When he came home, he was really sick and threw up black barf on his cake before passing out. Haven't seen him since. Last I heard is that he'd ingested alien goo or something. He probably ate some bad prawns or something. I worked quite hard at planning a surprise party for my best friend in the flat we shared. Her boyfriend was to bring her home at a set time. We were all sitting in the living room with our eyes on the front door, waiting for her to enter as we'd seen his car go by. All part of the plan, except he brought her in the back door. She walks into the living room, and all of our backs were to her, and she asked what we were doing. When I asked him why he brought her in the wrong door, he said it was because parking was better on that side. Idiot! Guy walks in with his pants open, stroking his Johnson. The lights go on, someone jumps out screaming, "Happy birthday!" The guy was scared crapless, pulled up the zip, jams it on himself and screams in pain. Everyone else jumps out and screams too. Everyone is screaming. My ribs hurt from laughing. Female friend of mine threw a surprise party for her boyfriend, 4-year relationship, and invited all of his close friends and some of her own friends as well. He was at his mum's place having a mini party with his family, whilst we were all waiting at their place, where he thought that they were just coming home to get ready and go out for dinner. We'd decorated the house with really awesome stuff, bought a DJ to play music, and brought really nice food. 3 cakes, one made by his mum, one made by her mum, and one bought by one of his friends. There were some quite expensive presents there as well. It was all adding up to be an awesome night. The guy then realizes that something's going on, and after 30 minutes of texting, he tells her that she should just F off, since she knows that he hates surprise parties, and that he isn't going to show up, and that after that he's just going to go watch a football match instead. He checks himself in on Facebook at the match 20 minutes later, ignores everyone's calls and messages, and about an hour later, we were waiting and eating some food since we weren't going to waste all this awesome stuff on this jerk, he shows up after half the people have left and breaks up with her. Yeah, he was a D-bag. Why did you get blocked by a famous person on Twitter? I asked William Shatner if it was true that he's a jerk, and he said yes, and then blocked me. I respect both of you in this situation. Alec Baldwin blocked me after his alleged parking incident. He tweeted something about getting out to vote, and I wrote back that parking was a little tough at my polling place, but I'm sure I can find a spot amicably. My sister was blocked by Ryan Murphy because she said something bad about the writing of Glee. It's still crazy to me that a show that established in the first episode that it was a parody of high school dramas and musicals so quickly turned into the thing that it had parodied. I was blocked by the UK celebrity Mel Kershaw on Instagram. All she did was post promotions and adverts for stuff she was being paid for. It never once said promotion, so I mentioned it in the comments. Blocked. Was blocked by both Chris Brown and Famous Dex because I tagged them in memes about domestic crimes and stuff. I didn't get blocked per se, but back in the MySpace days I told Ice Cube if he was in my area he could come smoke a doobie with me. He replied, "Don't do substances," and then unfriended me. I have a friend who was blocked by Smash Mouth for implying that the lead singer and Guy Fieri are the same person. He then sent a cease and desist letter to the radio station they work at. Sensitive guy, that Guy Fieri. I was banned by Tito Ortiz. He got himself trapped inside an elevator and didn't appreciate me telling him his head was too heavy and he should have taken the stairs. You know, Piers Morgan didn't like it when I reminded him of the time he intercepted voicemails on Nigel Haver's phone so he could print stories about the guy's dying wife. Oh, Piers Morgan. You know, I think if we ever get enough money and ink to release a fully illustrated dictionary, we should have his picture printed as the definition of the word slimy. Every story I hear about that man has made me detest him just a little bit more. My friend got blocked by Dr. Phil on Instagram because she commented "Daddy" on one of his posts. I'm blocked by Tyler Oakley, the YouTuber, because in 7th grade I tweeted, "I don't even like Tyler Oakley," and I'm guessing he searched his own name and blocked me. My sister got blocked by him because she tweeted something about him not having a career anymore. I was blocked by Dolly Parton after I asked if she was related to the Dalai Lama. I was blocked by Dan Schneider back when iCarly was still on air for criticizing a blog post he made. I never even liked that guy even though his shows were my childhood. I was heavily involved in the fandom for his shows, mostly Drake and Josh and iCarly back in the LiveJournal days. He made a LiveJournal account and started posting in the communities, and everyone freaked out. He was essentially forced out and made a blog on WordPress or something instead. Great shows, creepy dude. I'm an attorney and consulted with someone who wanted to sue Twitter after they banned her account from comments to LeBron James. Boy, was she mad. Calvin Harris blocked me and I still have no idea why. I've never even tweeted him or tweeted about him. I asked Sean Price to block me, so he replied, "Done," and then blocked me. Rest in peace, Sean Price. I, along with half of Australia, have been blocked by Will Wheaton. Apparently he used a block list after arguing with some Australian columnist or journalist and blocked everyone who follows her. I was blocked by AVXRY because he was calling someone toxic, and I proceeded to link him a 20-minute video compilation of him being toxic. He's a Fortnite streamer who has a reputation of being toxic, in case you didn't know. I got blocked by North Korea's state news Twitter, which was the only Twitter North Korea had at the time, because I mentioned that Kim Jong-il was the dictator with the best fashion sense. Kurt Schilling blocked me for congratulating him on making the Hall of Fame. Blocked by Mike Doty, who's a musician and former frontman of a band in the 90s and noughties called Soul Coughing. The band broke up and most of the members hate him, so he's really bitter about soul coughing songs. He did a lot of substances too, so I think soul coughing in general brings up a lot of bad memories. He tweeted that he was reminiscing and listening to soul coughing songs and how they were all crap. I replied and just mentioned that I had really fond memories of rocking out to soul coughing while I was working at Subway in high school. And he replied asking me if I wanted him to feel differently. Weird response, but I replied again and said something to the effect of, "Oh, absolutely not. You feel how you feel and that's fine. I'm just pointing out that people tend to be their own worst critics." I was blocked. No crap, like 2 months later the guy released an album of him covering soul coughing songs solo. It was so dumb. The guy owes 90% of his fanbase to the success of soul coughing, and when he went solo he covered their stuff all the time. It bummed me out because I was a big fan and just wanted to be supportive. Blocked by E.L. James for questioning her book's authenticity and portrayal of the alternative bedroom culture. Blocked by Kirstie Alley for questioning Scientology. E.L. James is terrible. She has the audacity to send her lawyers after writers who are putting out works that are, quote, derivative of the 50 Shades of Grey series, which she is absolutely milking dry, when the only reason her series exists is because she so blatantly plagiarized Twilight. I never thought I'd stand up for Stephenie Meyer, but E.L. James did her so wrong. My cousin was blocked by Drake after commenting on one of his Insta posts, "Why do you write songs about women not wanting you when you're exactly the kind of man women should avoid?" I got blocked by Taylor Swift by tweeting her a picture of me 35 times. "Oh, she was okay with 34, but you crossed the line with 35. Somehow I was blocked by Marlee Matlin. I'm a big fan of hers, so I thought that was strange. I noticed when I saw I wasn't following her and thought I was, so I followed again and it wouldn't allow it. Eventually, I tweeted at her agent or publicist or something and asked her about it. I never got a response, but she did end up unblocking me. Not Twitter, but I got blocked on Instagram by then Patriots receiver Brandon LaFell in 2015 for commenting, "Brandon the Ball LaFell out of my hands." I was blocked by Bill Cosby for tweeting at him, "Block me if you committed the unspeakable act against all those women." Deadmau5 blocked me when I called him Skrillex and asked him to DJ my 8-year-old son's birthday party. I mean, why would you block someone for that? I honestly think I would have been delighted by the viciousness of that one. When someone with that big of a following feels sore enough to block one of the untold millions writing to them on social media, it has to be a devastating burn to them personally, right? Oh boy. Recently, I was blocked on a Facebook page of a UK company. The company stole the art of a small Canadian artist and used it for their company name and logo. When called out on it by the artist herself, they said she must be confused as they have an XO after the name. Side-by-side comparison of the original and the logo are exact. When she asked again that they stop using it, they threatened to sue her for slander. Myself and others found their Facebook page and called them out for stealing art. Blocked. Girl Gang Liverpool is their name. Pretty crappy of them since they're supposed to be a makeup company run by women, celebrating and uplifting other women, and they steal art from a female artist. Coors' Twitter account banned me because I wrote how grateful I was to them to be able to drink a bowl of Coors Light each morning on my drive to work. This is pretty funny. Jenny McCarthy tweeted out an open-ended question about what people look for in their ideal romantic partner. I responded, "Someone who believes in vaccination," and blocked. A guy got blocked by Colgate for tweeting them, "It's teeth paste." I tweeted a picture of a burnt hot dog to Ryan Reynolds and asked if it looked like Deadpool's member. Blocked. No regrets though. Mark S. Brownlee was blocked by Gal Gadot because he noticed that she used an iPhone to tweet about how good Huawei phones are. For a while, I'd use Snapchat to face swap myself with Trump and do my impression of him. I'd share these impressions on Twitter and tag him in the posts. One day, I come to find I can no longer tag him. I was blocked by the President of the United States. I've since been unblocked because of that judicial ruling about freedom of information or whatever. Getting blocked by Trump is too easy. The man has a thinner skin than a shaved grape. I got blocked on Twitter by Myers Leonard, the backup PF for the Portland Trailblazers, for telling him he was a waste of cap space. Then I sent him the screenshot of me being blocked by him to him on Instagram, saying it was nice that he finally got a block this year. I mean, my mum rarely uses Twitter other than to tweet the museums, and she wrote something about an art piece which Kanye West hearted. She blocked him. I got blocked by Alex Jones when I responded to one of his tweets attacking one of the Parkland kids with, "Why are you so obsessed with these kids when you can't even see your own?" Freshman year of college, when we all hopped on Twitter, I still had a regular phone, not a smart one, I guess. Anywho, I usually browsed via the web and mostly followed people I knew and actually interacted with. I opted for the text version of Twitter, since I wouldn't always have my laptop on me and the phone browser was garbage. I ended up following a few celebrities somewhere along the line, and I decided to unfollow Marlon Wayans as he had a fair number of tweets going out that I just didn't find amusing. The way text Twitter worked is that you could text the number after you had set it up and it'd tweet for you. You could also give it little codes like the AD at the front for a direct message. I thought I could just tell it to unfollow Marlon Wayans by writing "Stop at Marlon Wayans" and a few other variations of that. Unwittingly, they did go out as tweets and he saw them. I wish he'd just blocked me, but no, he roasted my avatar, and, well, we know how the internet works. I had to stay off Twitter for a while after that. My old roommate got blocked by Amy Schumer when he tweeted that he didn't think her Netflix special was very funny. That's all it took. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. CJ Nitkowski mocked a lot of, quote, nerds for critiquing Buck Showalter on his decision not to use Zach Britton in the late 2016 AL wildcard game. He kept making comments about how Buck knew more, then the spreadsheets, how these guys never played, and when the O's lost, I quoted one of his tweets from the night with a comment along the lines of, "Buck sure knew best," and he blocked me instantly. I got blocked by Jenny McCarthy for replying something positive about vaccinations. "How dare you challenge my beliefs with knowledge and science?" Not what you asked for, in fact, the complete opposite. At the time, I was pretty heavily anti-Chael Sonnen, the MMA fighter, and I called him out for his antics on Twitter, being a typical youthful edgelord like I was. While all this was going on, I was in the process of raising money for charity. I grew my hair and beard for a year, no trimming, no grooming, no nothing. I'd been putting the link out on my Twitter quite heavily to try and get donations. Wouldn't you know, Mr. Sonnen ignored all of my crap talking and actually donated to my fundraising. It really made me look in the mirror and look at him as a person. Now I'm a couple of years older and I can see that he's actually a pretty decent guy who played a character for promotion purposes. In short, I griefed an MMA fighter on Twitter. He donated to my fundraising instead of getting angry. It's nice to see some sort of reflection from these people once they've grown up a bit. And he may not have even been aware of your devastating roasts, to be honest. I don't follow MMA fighters, but they always seem to have a disproportionate amount of wealth and success and followings to what I expect. I started a podcast about comic books. I'm not a Twitter user, but apparently it's a thing you do. So I started following the accounts of numerous artists and writers. I hadn't followed comics in decades, so I had no idea about whatever drama was going on. Turns out that by following some people, I'm on some sort of block list for other people's Twitter. What's crazy is that it's an industry in trouble. Comics used to sell much better than today. It used to be you were cancelled if you sold less than 100,000 copies. Today, the average comic from DC or Marvel sells around 8,000 copies, so the notion of blocking potential readers is odd to me. I got blocked by Joel Osteen for tweeting, "If he could, Jesus would slap the frick out of Joel Osteen's slimy plastic face." But was I wrong? Alec Baldwin blocked me for saying that Boss Baby sucked. I got blocked by Kevin Durant after I asked him how Draymond's butthole tasted. I made fun of a Call of Duty esports player by saying his nose was big, to which he blocked me. I then met him at a gaming event in New Orleans where I shook his hand and asked him to unblock me, which he did right in front of me. I proceeded to tweet about his nose again, and I'm still blocked to this day. I got blocked by William Shatner. He was fighting on Twitter with a coworker of mine, and I responded with something like, "This seems like a misunderstanding. Please don't fight." He proceeded to talk trash about my job title, and I responded something like, "Whoa, I'm a fan. When my mum was fighting cancer, one of the things that made her smile was when we'd watch Boston Legal together." And then he blocked me and basically everyone who works at my company. So yeah, screw that guy. Yeah, he's notoriously hot and cold with fans. One moment he'll be super sweet and act like you're the world to him. Next moment he'll be shanking your mom to death for being in the same airport as him. CNN blocked me because I sent them a picture of Patrick Star punching SpongeBob after I told them a violent fight broke out in downtown LA. My husband. He kept reminding the singer Brandy about the time she ran over someone. He personally dislikes Brandy and finds it ridiculous that everyone just got over the fact that she killed someone with her car. I thought him getting blocked was appropriate and also hilarious. My husband always tells me about how he made a Twitter account to share a nice comic he doodled with Wizards of the Coast, and he got banned from Twitter for it. One tweet. Jonah Hill blocked me for repeatedly commenting, "Do you like propane and propane accessories as much as your Uncle Hank?" A famous writer blocked me because I told her how hormones work in males and females and how having less testosterone didn't make women bad at logic. She does workshops about this stuff and people pay up to $200 to attend it. It's usually targeting women to teach them how to be more masculine in terms of being smart and confident and stuff. Utter garbage. I got blocked by Janelle from Teen Mom, and yes, I'm stretching famous quite a lot here. I called her a trash piece of crap mom. I still don't think I'm wrong. My friend got blocked by Trump because he kept tweeting at him about how hot he thought he was and begging to bang him. I was blocked by Craig Ferguson because I tweeted at him that his mustache was ugly. The mustache was short-lived. This is my crappy story about meeting the legitimately rad dude Doug Benson as I waited for my in and out order. Back when Twitter was text-only, 40404, no app, I was a junior in high school. Still pretty straight edge, and I thought it was funny. I'd been trolling Doug Benson of all people and being a genuine jerk. He blocked me. Cut to 10 years later, and I'm a large advocate of Green Herb. I'm really into the LA comedy scene, and Doug is one of my favorites. A really funny comedian. He's in Trailer Park Boys, Super High Me, has great podcasts, and is very connected to his online audience. I've seen his Doug Loves Movies show live multiple times at this point. I'm seeing another show with my buddy, and we were in standing room only. My buddy and I leave a little early to catch a bite, and as we're walking back to my car, we catch Doug in the alley, smoking with a circle of guys around him, all talking about their favorite things of his. I'm not a fan of meeting people I like in real life, getting photos and all that crap. Our relationship through my headphones is enough for me. But I figure, hey, this would be a great time to finally get back access to his Twitter, so I can at least know if he's coming to my town in a bit more advance notice than just hearing about it in a podcast the week it happened. We go over to him, I ask him if he wouldn't mind unblocking me as I go in, and he's just genuinely really cool about it. He asks why he would have blocked me in the first place, and I said I was just a stupid high school kid. He unblocks me, and as he's clicking through, he passes me the doobie. He, my buddy, and I smoke it out for a minute and we shoot the crap with him. I feel like it's time to go, shake his hand, and we go on our merry way. Pretty perfect outcome in my book. Amy Schumer did one of those "tell me something I don't know" tweets. I was the first one to reply, "comedy," and blocked. Man, you guys do not like Amy Schumer, do you? The narrator has made it to his 30s without ever seeing a full piece of any of her comedy or movies, but surely she doesn't deserve as much hate as some of the other people we're hearing about here. I called out Vinod Khosla, a horrible billionaire who tried to keep people off his California beachfront property. This was unsuccessful, as the beaches of California are public, so he took it all the way to the Supreme Court, trying to use bizarre legal arguments that could have stripped everyone in the country of these gorgeous and awesome public beaches. When he saw a photo of traffic in LA during Thanksgiving and spun some bullcrap venture capitalist Silicon Valley D-bag disruptor yarn about how this could all be better with autonomous pods traveling on fixed routes, I said, "Oh, you mean like public transit? Will it be truly public, or do you keep those you don't like off it like you struggle to deny public beach access?" He blocked me. Oh, and he lost the case. Public beach access is still a thing, and he has to let every smelly beach bum onto his beach. Good riddance, and F you, you butthole. I got blocked by Kanye West after tagging him in a picture of an answer key a few years back. I got blocked by Steve Shives. Also, Will Wheaton blocked me after I called him a prick. I was blocked by Nick Crompton for tweeting that England was in fact not a city. I got blocked by Jenna Elfman for linking, I didn't even tweet, her disastrous Ask Me Anything on Reddit when all the comments turned to her involvements with Scientology. I was blocked by the Stone Cold Creamery Instagram because I kept DMing them memes. Not me, but a friend tweeted at Bush his McDonald's receipt with the order 911, asking if he had his order. Corey Feldman blocked me because I listened to a radio show that did a whole bit mocking him. I don't really know what else I expected, but 99% of these are just flat-out admissions from people trolling celebrities. Wow, people really don't want to hear from you anymore after you tell them they suck and to go choke on a whole bag of Johnsons? Really? Got blocked by John Crook for making one nut jokes and hashtagging one nut Crook on all of them. I was blocked by a YouTuber who recently brought a pedigree kitten. To justify not rescuing a cat, instead she said she was allergic to rescue cats and could only get a pedigree. I said, with no hatred intended, that being a rescue doesn't mean they can't be pedigree as well, it just means they don't have a home. Blocked. Smashmouth announced a tour with Toad the Wet Sprocket and announced a contest to name the tour. I suggested the Washed Up Tour and got insta-banned. No sense of humor. I'm currently blocked by Melania Trump because I replied to one of her tweets with a meme about her husband looking like a burnt potato. I'm blocked by Chris D'Elia on everything, and he recorded it. After seeing his Man on Fire special, I commented on his Instagram post, "Man on Fire wasn't great. That's it. Just my opinion on his special. Although his previous work and podcasts are amazing." So he goes through the thousands of comments, sees mine, and blocks me on Instagram. I find out weeks later. One day he tweets something and I reply, "Wait, can you unblock me on Instagram?" He replies with a laugh and blocks me on Twitter as well. The worst part is he recorded himself blocking my Twitter and posts it on Instagram. I can't link you because I'm blocked, but scroll down to around June of 2018 and you'll see the video. I was blocked by George Lopez because my friend told me to tweet him to fist my butt. What happened when the quiet, nice guy finally raged out? My mum. We had what we now refer to as the Jerry Springer Christmas when I was 7 or so. One aunt hated her sister-in-law and just started screaming at her. Then shoving started, husbands got involved, and then it just continued to devolve from there. My mum went straight into mediator mode and tried to calm everyone down, but it wasn't working. She decided to come check on us kids and found my cousin and me holding each other and sobbing because we were scared. The next thing I hear is her scary mum voice screaming over everyone, "Listen here, you motherfrickers, my kid is crying on Christmas because her family can't keep their crap together for the one day a year that we all see each other. You're going to march your butts into that room single file and apologize to each kid individually, then you're going to shut the frick up until I get them out of here. We're going to go find and look at lights, and this family better be the picture of goddamn Christmas joy by the time we get back." My mum had never really cussed in front of me before and had only ever used goddamn when things were really bad. That side of the family didn't celebrate Christmas for a few years after that. A colleague at work was getting chewed out by a customer about something completely irrelevant. The guy was one of the most placid humans I've ever met, but he just snapped and tore into this guy for about 10 minutes until the manager came down and took him to one side. Never saw him lose it like that again. I had a master sergeant at one of my units in the army. The guy was half asleep most of the time. I don't think I ever heard him talk more than once. One day, all of the guys got called into a large classroom and he was in there looking upset. He launched into a rant about how easy it was to go number one in the toilet instead of on the ground in front of it. The guy was passionate about where people went number one. drew a stick figure diagram all angrily showing how you use one hand to stabilize and aim your stream into the toilet. I had to keep from laughing because he seemed like he was about to blow his lid. A mechanic I worked with was getting verbally attacked by a customer claiming he ripped him off. The guy's going off, saying all kinds of racist crap, and then stepped up like he was going to swing. Henry beat him to the punch, literally. Then he walked calmly to the back office and called the cops on himself. One of my teachers in high school was the calmest dude ever. Never yelled, never told kids off, would just laugh and smile and wait for us all to calm down and then continue with his teaching. One day we must have been getting particularly rowdy and we weren't calming down like we usually did. He couldn't get a word in edgeways. I could see him getting increasingly frustrated and eventually he just bellowed, "Shut up!" And the entire class was shocked into silence. He never had to do it again. That's the thing about the nice people in life. Often when they do go full murder rage, it's that much more shocking because of who's doing it, not the fact that it's happening to begin with. You know, it takes a lot to make my mum yell. On the rare occasion she did yell, it still felt like she had self-control. Like she yelled on purpose because there was a reason to yell. Like she needed to be that loud for us to hear. Or one of the kids needed to learn to never run into traffic again, for example. But one morning when we were teenagers, my brother was being really difficult. And my very sweet, soft-spoken mother yelled, "God damn it, Sean!" and threw a butter knife down so hard that it stuck a 1/4 inch deep into the oak hardwood floor, against the grain. I can still hear the noise it made. You know, we were all very well behaved for the rest of that day. I did eventually ask my mum why she did that, and her explanation was that she felt too angry to hold a knife, even a butter knife, and was trying to get it out of her hand before she did something terrible. I was chilling at a friend's house as a kid. His dad was the chillest, nicest guy. And that day, my friend's mum, also super nice, was across the street talking to the neighbor about something that I can no longer recall. The neighbor was one of those guys who never respected common etiquette. Music blaring, parking his crappy boat in front of other people's houses, cars parked on the lawn. The neighbor started screaming at the mum and we all went out on the stoop to see what was happening. As soon as we got outside, the guy called my friend's mum a C-word. Well, my friend's dad heard that and went full Hulk mode. He ran, screaming across the street and just frickin' decked the guy and crouched over him shouting warnings and threats. It took a while for his wife to calm him down. I don't think any of them had ever seen him react to something that way. Maybe the dad had never seen it before either. I worked as a line cook with a chef who I became really good friends with. Really chill dude, easygoing, and actually really fun to cook with. He taught me most of what I know about cooking, and I owe him a lot for my success. Never really saw him get mad until one day we were getting slammed during a busy night, and one of the servers said something that really ticked him off. Not sure if I ever heard what it was, but the next thing I knew he sent the deep fryer basket flying at Mach 1 across the kitchen, nearly missing the dish kid and shattering a light bulb. He stormed off and 5 minutes later, after a smoke break, came back and casually continued cooking as if nothing had happened. He apologized about it the next day and we never talked about it again. The restaurant industry is a stressful place. When I was in my late teens, I was financially irresponsible and borrowed money from my grandparents to move out of my mum's house. We made a plan about how I'd pay it back in installments, and I only missed 2 of the payments, and with each one I called my granddad and asked if it was okay. He was always so cool about it. But one day I got a call from him and he was livid, screaming at me on the phone, and I could hear my grandmother crying in the background. He was the angriest I've ever heard anyone in my life, and I was terrified. He wanted to know why I hadn't made the payment that month, but I was sure I had. Turns out I'd accidentally set the automated payment to be drawn from the wrong account, and it hadn't done it. It was an honest mistake on my part, and I explained that to him. I transferred the money immediately, and he instantly calmed down. I later found out he had become an alcoholic after he quit smoking, and he'd talk to my grandmother like that regularly when no one was around. I used to see this woman in my building every day. Very friendly. We always checked on each other's lives. We had lunch a few times over the years. It was friendly to a certain degree. A couple of years passed. She was much older than me, and one day, riding the elevator, she told me she was saying goodbye. I said I was sorry to see her go and asked why. She said she was retiring that day. I asked if her office was throwing a party or if she was celebrated. She turned to me and her face contorted into an image of rage. She clenched her teeth and said she didn't tell anyone in her office, including her bosses.
She only told HR last week. This was her last day and she was never returning to see or talk to anyone in her office again. I had a friend who was in his 60s, a functioning alcoholic, but he was the most calm and composed guy that I've ever known. He never raised his voice or swore. Everything was done with meticulous precision. He once explained to me that if you use vulgar language and shout all the time, then you'll have nowhere to go when you really do get angry. I'd worked with him for about 3 years and never heard him raise his voice or swear before. The week before, he had been shafted on his pay, and the manager promised to get it sorted by Friday. Friday rolled around and it hadn't been sorted. So when my friend walked up to the manager in the open office and declared loudly, "Where the frick is my money? You promised this would be resolved," the whole office went silent and the look of dread on the manager's face was haunting. The money was in his account by the end of the day. That was him losing his crap. My husband. For your information, he works in a very hands-on clinic and he has to be super calm and steady because he's poking needles into the joints, elbows, and knees of squeamish patients all day. I was brought into emergency because my labor wasn't progressing. I was running a fever and the baby was in distress. He knew an emergency C-section was the only way, but those 2 maternity nurses were just calmly chatting over my writhing form like it was tea time. He very calmly asked them twice to call for the anesthetist and get things going. But they knew he was always gentle and they just nodded along without moving an inch. More chatting, I was quite medicated when I witnessed the following. He slammed both palms to the side of the stretcher and said, "Is no one listening? Get the consultant in here." I was very proud of him that day. There are 3 things all wise men fear: the sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man. I've also realized that this is a kind of film trope as well. The mild-mannered person flipping out and rendering everyone speechless. I mean, clearly it has a real-life basis. This isn't my story, but my dad's. Growing up, his best friend Leif was a quiet, shy guy that was a bit socially awkward. In school, he wasn't physically bullied, but this one kid teased him constantly. This would have been late 50s, early 60s, so kids were just expected to tough it out. My dad would usually confront the kid, but one day a girl runs up to him and says that Leif and the kid are fighting. My dad runs over to save Leif, but when he breaks through the circle he finds the bully flat on his back, with Leif sitting on his chest, holding him by the ears and smashing his head into the pavement over and over. My dad tackles him, wrestles him to the ground and screams at him, asking what he's doing. The thing that stayed with me from that story was how he described it. It was like there was nothing in there. I felt like I could see the back of his skull through his eyes. Luckily, they were kids, so the damage was serious but limited. The bully escaped with stitches and a concussion, and Leif had to talk to the school psychologist. My dad and Leif stayed best friends, and when I met him as an adult, he was still quiet, but less shy and awkward. Man, my grandma has a similar thing. This boy was a couple of years older than she was, and he was constantly picking on her. He's riding his bike home from school one day, and he rides past her and he's shouting at her and she knocks him right off his bike and beat the crap out of him. My sweet little granny. The neighbor saw it and said he was proud as crap that she beat the snot out of this crappy little kid. I think it was the start of my grandma's bad witch streak, because not much later she started street racing. She was allegedly a sweet little girl, but man, I think she must have had a mean streak in her. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad is the most mild-mannered person I've ever met. He's the most composed, level-headed man that I know. I once saw him trip in our garage and land in a bucket of nails and screws to realize that he'd had one lodged in his kneecap. He looked over at me and said, "Don't tell your mum, she'll overreact," while he grabbed a pair of pliers and yanked out the screw. But when something happened to my special needs brother, he'd get this sparkle in his eye that could scare a Navy SEAL. When I was 8 years old, my parents took my brother and I to eat at a restaurant, which was kind of a big deal because my brother was recently diagnosed with a degenerative physical health issue which was racking up huge medical debts, all while my dad lost his job after getting the bends on a work dive. We went to our favorite Mexican restaurant in town and parked in the handicapped spot nearest the front door. I still remember having an unusually light-hearted time in which I could see my parents' stress level subside and listened to funny stories about the past. We simply enjoyed a memorable dinner with lots of laughter. Looking back, I realized this was a big expense that my parents probably couldn't afford and sacrificed for, so that we could have a normal night as a family.
When we left the restaurant, we found a car parked next to us, not in a parking spot, but in the yellow stripes immediately next to our van. Normally, this might not be an issue, but my brother was in a wheelchair and we had a folding ramp. Not the hydraulic lifts that you see today, but a heavy metal powder-coated ramp. This was a Friday night, so traffic was crazy busy and my parents didn't feel comfortable just backing up into the street to load my brother, so my dad went into the restaurant to see if the manager could find the owner of the car and ask him to move. When my dad emerged from the restaurant, I saw a look that I've never seen before. It was one of focus, determination, and rage. He looked at my mum and told her to get in the car. She just hopped in and said, okay, in a way that indicated she knew something was about to go down. He turned to me and said, "Watch this crap." He unfolded the ramp and it slammed down onto the roof of the car next to us. He then turned to explain that the manager had just told him, "I'm not responsible for what happens in the parking lot. Why don't you just figure something out?" So my father did figure something out. To be clear, there were maybe 4 or 5 groups eating in the restaurant. The manager could have easily asked someone to move. We waited for a minute and the manager came out yelling, "What are you doing? You can't do that!" This was when my dad lost it. At this point, he picked up my brother's wheelchair with him in it, which weighed about 150 to 200 pounds, and sat him on the hood of the car while yelling at the manager. He then jumped up on the hood of the car, picked up my brother to put him on the roof of the car, still giving my manager the business. He jumped up to the roof and calmly rolled my brother across the ramp from the roof of the car into our van. He told me to get in and calmly told the manager, "I figured something out." Since that day, I've never seen anything remotely close to the same level of anger from him. We laugh about the story from time to time, and my dad is always quick to say that he overreacted, but I think he reacted just fine. We do believe that the car in question was the manager's because any customer could have seen what was happening from inside the restaurant, so we don't feel too bad. My dad never had to do this again because he had some incredibly bright orange stickers made to say, "You park like a moron," that he kept on him at all times just in case someone needs to be reminded of what they are by placing it on their driver's side window. I used to do seasonal work sorting tax returns, like 500 people in a warehouse-sized room sorting through returns, stacking them in boxes. Anyway, we had this one guy on my team, a huge guy, a gentle giant, really nice. Suddenly, one day he smashed the table he's working at, then flips a big box full of paperwork. It flew over my head and 20 feet away. He threw the table out of his way, then stormed out. Turns out he was getting his paycheck garnished for something or other. Well, they would have thought twice about doing that again. I have no clue whether the garnishment was deserved or not, but maybe avoiding making your Hulk-sized employee angry and looking the other way is a policy a lot of managers make a point of following. I remember having these 2 friends in the 5th grade who at the time I didn't think they'd thought of me as their friend, because I'd been bullied up to 4th grade, moved the summer before 5th grade, and everyone called me annoying and kept me at a distance for those 4 years. There was this one day where the one kid was being a complete jerk for no reason, literally just making fun of people, pushing others, so on and so forth. Well, for some reason, he decided that I was worthy of getting punched, so he came from behind and somehow hit me in the eye. This was at recess, mind you. Well, when I got back to class, these 2 tall kids, one girl and one guy, saw that I had a bruised eye and had been crying. The moment they got the chance, they came over and asked me in an angry tone, "Who hurt you?" And I remember thinking something like, "Oh crap, I can't let them know who hurt me, they'll kill him." So they kept asking the entire rest of the week until I finally told them, and when I did, I felt extremely guilty. These 2 kids had asked me for help a few times in class, we talked from time to time, and I sometimes let them have part of my lunch that I didn't want but they liked. They were the kind of kids to have never been seen getting even slightly annoyed at anyone ever, so when they kept asking me who hurt me, I felt scared for the guy that hit me, and I was right to be afraid. At recess, the day after I told them who hit me, I saw them drag the guy behind some trees which were behind the playground. No one was supposed to go there. And from there on out, I couldn't see what they did, but before recess ended, this one kid, with the other 2 standing behind him the whole time, apologized, and I could tell he had been crying on the way to me. I told him it was fine, and the 2 kids let him go. After he left, I asked them why they hurt him, and they said, "Because he hurt our friend and we'll do it again if he tries hitting you again." I did feel like crying after they said that, but held my tears in. For the rest of 5th grade and up, and all of middle school, they hovered around me, and anyone who seemed like they might want to start crap with me got chased away by my 2 friends. If I could find them again and express my gratitude to them, I'd do it 1,000,000 times over. They were the very first people to get angry on my behalf, ever, and stick around with me. My math teacher in middle school. He would even brag about not being angry and about how it was a useless emotion. One day, this kid ticked him off so bad, he swiped all of the kids' crap off the table in front of the whole class and kicked him out. My 5th grade teacher was a very calm and collected individual, except for one time when a kid said her mother did the deed with men for money. The teacher lost it. She was screaming about disrespect and stuff and even called her mum, put her on the speaker and asked if she was a working girl, in front of the whole class. I miss that teacher. My first semester in college, I was in a math class with a horrible teacher. The entire class hated him. The girl that sat in front of me was very sweet and soft-spoken. One day, I don't remember what set her off, but she just snapped and started screaming at him. It caused such a commotion that someone had to call security to check if everything was okay. The teacher quickly dismissed security and went back to teaching like nothing had happened. I've noticed this with people who are aware that they're the jerks when people call them out on it and lose their crap. They try to sweep it under the rug, move on as quickly as possible and pretend nothing happened. My boss does this. I'm very chill, but every once in a while he pushes me over the edge and I tell him off. He often won't respond or makes eye contact and then pretends like it never happened a few minutes later. If they acknowledge it, then they'd have to apologize and that'd hurt their pride too much. Oh, boy, do I have one for this. So during my previous pre-pandemic job, I worked with a really talented, super nice manager named James, who was a total professional and very good with customers. He's one of those guys you look at, and from sheer physical size, you'd think he could easily be a bouncer. But he's just an absolute teddy bear of a human being. It didn't matter what changes came down from the top of the company or how business was going, the guy just soldiered on as a beacon of positivity. Never got visibly mad or upset, he was pure Teflon to bad news. But one day I got a call from a janitorial service we contracted with to do a lot of the deeper cleaning at our facility. During this call, they asked me to confirm that we have 2 day shifts and 1 overnight shift cleaning our building. I don't know why this came up exactly, but it was puzzling since we only ever had 1 day cleaning shift and 1 overnight cleaning shift, and this had been the case ever since I began working at that particular location. It had probably been a year and a half, maybe 2 years by this point. They kept insisting that I must be mistaken and that surely there was a second shift during the day that I was just missing. However, I was the guy who had to regularly review their work and submit this feedback to the contracted company, so I was 100% certain that we'd only ever had the 1 day shift. Eventually, I put them on hold and informed James of this, and like a switch, the guy completely changed his attitude. Gone was the James who always had a smile on his face and never let anything get to him. In his place arrived a stone-faced mountain of a man who asked me to let him talk to these people. I gave him the phone, he goes into his office, and I watched through the window as he becomes increasingly animated, maybe even to the point of outright yelling, as the truth comes out that we had been charged for the second daytime janitorial shift that had never actually existed. It was like watching a teddy bear turn into a grizzly in the span of 3 minutes. The guy was able to move past it and returned to his normal self after the call. But while he was on it, I could tell he was just incensed by the fact that we were being billed for services that we weren't actually receiving. Klutzes. What are the worst injuries you've sustained doing a basic task? I dislocated my knee putting socks on. I was standing near the foot of my bed and was doing a balancing act putting the socks on. When I went to put my right leg back down, my pants leg somehow got stuck on the footboard of my bed. My jeans somehow decided to rip and my knee moved in a way it was never intended to. I'm definitely a klutz and tend to find myself in weird situations like this far too often. I got out of bed a few weeks ago and turned my ankle. I tore every ligament and have to use crutches now. Laughing with a friend of mine at Dairy Queen. I laughed so hard because he pulled out a Johnny instead of money and he thought everyone saw him, so I burst into gut-wrenching laughter, apparently rupturing my L4, L5, S1 vertebrae, requiring immediate surgery. Tore my ACL and meniscus in my right knee while pulling my pants up changing in the locker room after swim practice. It took 2 surgeries and 6 months of recovery to get back to normal. Because of pants. I was sitting on a couch. There was a blanket on the floor barely covering my feet. While seated, I leaned forward to pull the blanket onto myself. I pulled a muscle in my back and was out of work for 4 days. I broke my collarbone after accidentally rolling onto the floor off a bunk bed. It was the bottom bunk. My brothers and I shared a room until I was about 9. As the youngest, I was usually assigned the top bunk. At one point, I woke up face down on the floor with a nice crusty pool of blood in the carpet about the size of my face. Sometime throughout the night, I'd fallen off the bunk and nearly broken my nose, but simultaneously knocked myself out from the impact. Rather than get a railing, my dad built a custom bunk bed with 3 bunks, like an L-shaped desk with 2 levels, and I was assigned one of the lower beds. My middle brother ended up jumping off the top bunk into the lower bunk quite often. Once he jumped too far and broke his nose on the wall. I think all of us are a bit clumsy. The narrator doesn't think that you or anyone in your family should be allowed near multi-level apparatuses again in your lives. Those things clearly don't agree with you. Hopefully nobody in your family works on scaffolding because that's a tragedy waiting to happen. I've pulled a muscle while doing the incredibly complicated task of walking and taking off a jacket. There was sudden lightning in my back, I couldn't walk for a week, had to go to physical therapy for 3 months. Turns out I wasn't using my muscles correctly for years. I had to relearn how to use my own body so that it hopefully won't happen again. Physical therapy is great, by the way, even if you aren't in pain anymore. I injured my knee by crouching to pet a cat. I could barely walk for a few days and couldn't do any exercise or sports for nearly a month. I built a nice counter for our laundry room, installed a new washing machine, installed the wall-mounted dryer, made shelves with the leftover wood, and even found time to plant an apple tree that my mum bought, all in the same day. I then slipped a disc when I was washing my hands. When I was a little kid, I fell over and broke my collarbone while sitting and eating waffles. I wish this was fake, although it was pre-broken. About a year before this incident, I'd broken the same bone playing on my mother's bed. I believed I was a Power Ranger and rolled off the bed onto the hard wooden floor. I was once concussed after being dropped off late to school, turned back to wave to my dad and ran smack straight into a stop sign and dropped cold. Little me, about 8 years old, spent a few hours gazing through his telescope at the moon, the stars, and the sky. It was awesome. When I was done, I hugged my telescope, optical tube down and eyepiece up. I was very short, very, very short, almost telescope size back then, so of course I tripped. By reflex, I looked down while at the same time the big end of the telescope hits the ground and my mouth caught the eyepiece, almost, right between the upper lip and the nose. Went almost all the way in. It turns out my face is a gusher. In 2 spots it went all the way through my face meat and hit my front teeth. Lucky me it didn't crack a tooth. Thanks for the ER trip, Mr. Telescope. Who knew stargazing was such a dangerous activity? I sneezed and threw my back out. You know all those terrible injuries you get by exercising with heavy weights in the gym if you use poor technique? Well, how about stubbing your toe on the power rack so hard that you can't walk for days? My buddy decided to use the bench after someone had pressed 3 plates per side onto the rack and then not taking them off afterwards. Not being a physics person, he unracked all 3 plates on one side, went around and began to unrack one plate, and the bar flipped up, smacked him, and dropped the other plates on his big toe. He took a 8-year break from the gym after that. Pulled a muscle in my right butt cheek while taking a nap. Couldn't walk properly for the next 7 hours. 2 years ago, I tore my meniscus and blew out my knee playing ping pong at our office Christmas party. Stepped to the left and went down hard. Worst part was 2 days later when I finally stubbornly went to the emergency room and the nurses told me that the guy in front of me, a pro athlete, had the exact same injury from a vicious hockey hit. I bowled in college. One day I ended up showing up to practice late because I slept through my alarm when I took a nap. So I was rushing to get to practice like, oh boy, I've screwed up. And at this point, I'm like 30 to 45 minutes late, and I finally got to the bowling alley, and in my infinite wisdom, I decide I'm just going to start throwing shots without easing into it because I've already missed enough practice. It wasn't a day full of good decisions, as you can tell. 2 shots in, I proceed to throw out my hip and was limping around for over a week. I not only threw out a hip at 19, I did it bowling. In short, 19-year-old turns 65 in the blink of an eye. I broke my foot stepping off a curb. There was a minor pothole, and I mean a very small dip, that I didn't notice when stepping, and my foot rolled sideways as I put all of my weight on it. Heard the pop? Didn't hurt too bad at first, so I went about my day. When I got home, I couldn't get my shoe off without unlacing it fully due to swelling. Went in the next day and, yep, broke my foot by stepping off a curb. I grabbed a manila file folder at work and got a paper cut that needed stitches. Everyone at work was kind and understanding and didn't mock me. That last sentence was sarcasm. They gave me hell. I slept on my neck wrong and tore an artery. That created a blood clot which then lodged in my brain stem, causing a massive stroke. I spent a month in the hospital and had to relearn to swallow, speak, focus my eyes, stand, walk, and a dozen other little things. Don't fall asleep watching YouTube videos, I guess. I was cutting potatoes. Couldn't figure out why I couldn't cut completely through this specific potato. It turns out my finger was in the way. It wasn't a bad injury, it didn't hurt at all, didn't need stitches, and was actually pretty funny, but there was a ton of blood, and all the other students and the teacher were freaking out. Bleeding is fun, guys. Oh my god, someone's nerves weren't doing their job. I know that temporary suspension of pain can be a thing, but you do make it sound like you were carving away wondering what that bone-hard blockage was for a few seconds before you realized. Surely you should have noticed. In college, I broke my toe tripping over my desk chair in my dorm trying to get to my alarm to turn it off in the morning. Yes, I did turn off my alarm, but then I went back to sleep for about half an hour more. It only hurt like a stubbed toe at first. When I woke up later, it hurt a lot more and was all kinds of different colors. I was 7 years old, playing tag at a local children's park with a few friends. It was about 6 or 7 p.m. in the fall, getting darker by the second. I was running from the kid who was it, and because of how short I am, I ran into the plastic outside the bottom of a walkway, making a very deep and wide gash right above my right eyebrow. I blacked out for a minute or so. I came to without feeling any pain, and it didn't help that I have a very high pain tolerance. I felt something wet on my head and put my hand to it. Because it was dark out, young me saw the darker tinted substance in my hand. Thinking it was ketchup, I licked it. After about 10 seconds of processing the taste, I realized, oh, this is blood. I ran over to my dad and he, laughing his butt off, decided to take me back to our neighborhood to consult with our neighbor and good friend who was a nurse. She tells my dad to take me to the emergency room. At this point, he was laughing even harder. We went in, I got some stitches, don't remember how many, and I also got made fun of by my father. You know, 2 things have happened today that made me wonder if I'm the only one this crap happens to. The first, I burnt my eyelids after the egg I was frying flew out of the pan and smacked me in the face, and the second, my son fractured his wrist by banging into a pole while he was walking down the street. I used to skateboard about 25 to 30 kilometers a day when I lived in Amsterdam for at least 3 years straight. Never had any injuries or accidents. It's as easy and automatic as riding a bike is for the other Dutch people. I went out to skate for 2 minutes in the UK, fell and broke my collarbone right away. I blame having to ride on the other side of the road and bad luck. I stabbed myself in the butt cooking a pork chop. I was pan-frying it and had a knife in my right hand to keep checking it to see if it was cooked, by stabbing it. I'm really not a good cook. I kept said knife in my hand and the oil spat at me and I jumped and bam, stabbed myself in the butt. I also have a 4-inch scar on my inner arm from playing on the swing. But I constantly hurt myself in stupid little ways because I'm so damn clumsy. Not me personally, thank God, but someone I knew cut off their finger slicing a bagel in half. Using a handheld mixer to puree some mushrooms. Mushrooms clog the blades, I use my finger to remove the mushrooms, and without thinking, press start and cut my finger. 10 minutes later, do the same thing with my other hand. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not me, but my husband. He brushes his teeth very hard and fast. One day, he somehow hit his teeth and broke the toothbrush in half, then stabbed himself in the cheek. After 2 hours of trying to get the bleeding to stop, I bought some butterfly sutures to close the wound. Unfortunately, he did the same thing again a week later. He blames me for buying cheap toothbrushes. I broke my ankle while walking down the street in a foreign country. Slipped on a wet drain cover on the sidewalk. Surgery that night, 2 weeks in hospital, then managing the rest of the study abroad program on crutches. Years later, I now have major arthritis in the broken joint, which is more and more significantly limiting my mobility. As a bonus, I managed to break my toe by stubbing it while walking across my bedroom the day after I got back from a trip to a different foreign country. All my friends assumed that I'd injured myself abroad again. In short, walking normally leads to broken bones. My wife worked out during the first 8 months of her pregnancy, modified as necessary as our son was growing in her. She set a personal record of a 200-pound deadlift at the 8-month mark. She was scolded as that wasn't the time for PRs, but it was impressive nonetheless. Then she threw out her back bending over to pick up laundry on the floor. I fractured my wrist falling off a couch. I pulled a muscle in my hand while wiping my butt once. I also damaged my vocal cords because I held in a sneeze. I stepped on my finger and broke it when I was tying my shoe once. I got hurt by a screen door. I was taking my dog outside to use the bathroom early one morning, and Snoopy decided he had to go real bad and started flying down the stairs off the back porch. He was on a leash, and I didn't want to hurt him and make him fall down the stairs, so I rushed out behind him. I was wearing a pair of wool socks and slippers, and as I awkwardly started following him, the bottom corner of the screen door clipped me on the heel. It hurt a bit, and I just limped around as he did business. When I got back inside, I decided to take my sock off because it was uncomfortably hurting, and I saw there was a good amount of blood that had seeped through the sock. I pulled it off and saw that I had a pretty big gash across the back of my ankle. A frickin' screen door did that to me, all because of crappy timing. I broke my 2 smallest toes and the growth plate in my foot. You ever seen those giant plastic bins for wrapping paper? It was Christmas and I had the lid to one of those. I had my small dog in the lid and was pushing her up and down the hallway carpet on my hands and knees. Well, we had those old metal spring door stoppers and one of them no longer had the cap on it. I stubbed my toe on it and the spring hooked end went into my foot, wrapped around the bone, twisted my 2 toes upside down. Imagine my surprise when I looked down after thinking I'd simply stubbed my toe. I'm currently dealing with some sort of elbow and arm tendonitis from presumably using a stress ball too much. As a bonus, I was only using it to re-strengthen 2 other injuries. Oh my god, so we can wreck ourselves even just doing physio to recover from other issues? My god, we are a versatile species, aren't we? I broke my wrist shooting a basketball. I don't even know how it happened. I was in middle school and went up for a shot, then came down and was crying in pain. But yeah, I didn't make basketball tryouts. Feels bad, man. I punched myself in the mouth and chipped a tooth. I was putting on a bra. I gave myself a black eye the same way. I was so stunned it took me about 5 minutes to figure out what happened. My mum broke her foot stepping out of the front door. The step is about 4 inches. She was in her 30s, she'd lived in the house for years and used the step every day without incident. She doesn't have osteoporosis or any other bone problem. She didn't fall, she just put her foot down slightly off-center and it snapped one of her metatarsals. I was lying in bed and threw my back out. Damn, I couldn't breathe straight for over an hour before I managed to roll over to another position that I hoped was more comfortable. It was not. Big mistake. I also managed to get a concussion in my sleep when a lamp fell on my head. And if you don't count sleep as an activity, how about walking? I took some weird step and broke my little toe. You can't really go more mundane than walking, can you? I can have several pans and pots on different burners on the stove and handle a chef's knife pretty well. The worst burn I ever got was from the microwave, and I cut myself with a toaster while putting it away. My dad stabbed through his palm so hard with a knife while getting avocado pits out of avocados that he had a bruise on the back of his hand from where the tip almost went all the way through. He yelled out, "Frick a duck!" when it happened, pulled the knife out and instinctively jerked his hand to numb the pain, kind of, and created a Jackson Pollock painting of his blood all over the kitchen ceiling. Snowboarding. I spent the whole day at the terrain park, got a 360 down pretty well and was working my way up to hopping onto rails, building a lot of confidence before it was time to go. I only got to go snowboarding about 3 times a year maximum, so it was a big step for me and I was feeling really good about my day there. Then my little sister asked me to go down the bunny hill, which is where beginners and people who've never skied before go to learn. It's a gentle hill that hardly ever gets fast. I rode down it with my sister skiing beside me. Upon trying to stop at the bottom at a very low speed, I caught my edge and flipped, scorpioned myself so badly that my board blade actually sliced the back of my head and neck connection, and I bled a lot. A scorpion is when you fall onto your stomach and your heels still carry over, making a scorpion shape. In this case, my heels and snowboard were like a scorpion stinger. I was flat on my face in the snow, like the scorpion's belly. My scorpion stinger of a snowboard carried far enough to slice the back of my neck. I still use my blood-stained ski coat. I felt defeated, despite the skills I'd built up that day. I jumped through a set of aluminium double doors in the back of a grocery store to flirt with the cashier I'd crushed on as a bag boy. I'd grown a lot recently. The top of my head hit the cement top of the doorframe. It scalped me a bit, and I flipped and landed on my head on the hard, cold tile floor. The pool of blood surrounded me rapidly. I had to be taken to the hospital to get 22 stitches to reattach my scalp. I got the afternoon off work, though, and 2 weeks later I lost my virginity to that cashier. Worth it! I fell off a playground slide as a kid, and I have a 3-inch scar at my eye to show for it. If my father-in-law was on the internet, he'd say the time he threw his back out when my infant daughter tooted on his lap. I'd just pulled a pizza out of the oven and was about to devour it along with a 6-pack of beer, as you do. When I opened my fridge to get the beer, the bottom of the door caught my big toenail and separated it from my skin all the way to the base. The nail ended up falling off, and it took a full year to grow back. I've thrown my back out taking a dump before. Sometimes a crap is so serious you need a spotter to hold your hand. I mean, depending on what you ate that day, it could be a pretty serious change in weight distribution on your body when you stand up. There's probably a ridiculously high number of people who've injured themselves getting off the toilet, and I'm not joking. Throwing your back out during delivery is probably a bit rarer, though. Oh, I've got a couple. The first was my lung collapsing from just being alive and being tall. This happens a lot. It's called a spontaneous pneumothorax. Happens to tall, thin people. I was in line on Black Friday getting bubble tea. I thought it was a heartburn, slept it off, got worse, went to the ER next day, 3 weeks in hospital. I also broke my humerus at a soccer tournament. No idea how I broke it, I just woke up one day and my shoulder hurt, so I thought it was a cramp or a tight muscle. I proceeded to finish out the tournament, stretch, pull, and spin my shoulder around trying to get it to feel better. Yeah. All the stretching and moving made it worse, but hey, we won the tournament. Breaking a stick for firewood. It was about the thickness of a nickel. I was breaking it how I always break sticks that size, thumbs out and push through the middle, super simple and effective. Well, apparently my thumb had popped out when I started this process and I hadn't noticed. I continued through the stick breaking process until I felt my thumb go the wrong way. Dropped the stick and realized what had just happened. This was at summer camp, so I had a brace that kept my thumb in the thumbs-up position all summer. I did that all the time and in all photos. So much so that it became natural for me to pose thumbs up in photos. Oh, I have two. I leaned in to get a final clinging sock out of the drying machine and threw my back out for 2 weeks. The fact that my body weight caused it is what led to the next injury, which is… Through a diet, 1,000 varied calories a day, and exercise, at least 6 nights a week jogging for as much as 8 miles on a treadmill, I managed to lose 65 pounds in 5 months. This murder-faced my gallbladder with gallstones and required surgery. I remember laying in the emergency room in a different state when the surgeon explained that my rapid weight loss caused my gallbladder to get backed up with stones, processing all of that fat through. I exclaimed, "But I did exactly what you guys told me to do." I threw my back out while going number 2 at work. I came in to tell everyone I'd thrown my back out, but because my voice was struggling from the pain, they thought I was tearing up from our coworker having died just the day before. So one of them came over and gave me a hug mid-sentence, which just made things worse. Reached for the remote while lying on the couch and tweaked something in my back. It hurt for 2 weeks easily. I was low-key scared that I had some kind of cancer. No muscle should be hurt that easily. What's the craziest secret drama that went down at a university? Professors were purchasing tricked-out laptops with their budgets shortly before leaving the university. The university in turn would let the professors purchase the hardware for a song because it was used. We're talking about 2,000 to 3,000 euro machines being purchased 6 months down the line for 500 euros. Someone finally caught on to this scheme and now nobody can purchase the used hardware. I work for a prominent university in Japan. My Japanese colleagues tend to follow the rules very strictly and blindly follow manuals. One day an American professor had to rush to the US to see his dying mother. The staff members of class operations called him as he was grieving, asking him to still teach classes and review reports. Obviously, the lack of empathy and inflexibility led the professor to take his bags and work for another school. Students never knew the true reason why he stopped teaching. My teacher was Syrian. He was practically always at university, always tired, and always acting off. He'd sleep in his office, forget to hand back assignments, mix up basic things, cry randomly in the hallway. We later found out his family was being held hostage back home while he was teaching in Canada. The two parts that break my heart are that students used to hate him. I always liked him as a person, and as a teacher he was competent. He was just always late for everything and would mix up grades. I'd be annoyed, but sitting in his office and going through stuff, he'd always correct mistakes and was fair with his grading. He gave good feedback. When I found out the circumstances, it made me sad, because he isolated himself on the emotional side. If you wanted help, he was always there at your beck and call. If you wanted a meeting, he was there. I just wish we, as students, could have shown a bit more compassion. The second part that kills me is that we lost track of him. He took time off university. I've never seen or heard from him again. We never heard of the resolution, if any, he found. Wherever you are, Professor, I wish you the best. Our night shift janitor made some really good moonshine. Some of the professors and grad students would leave cash in our top desk drawers when we left work, and the next day a mason jar of handmade shine would be waiting there. He's since moved on from that department, but he was good people. You know, there was some real potential for being made when an unsuspecting person left some money in their drawers for their own purposes without knowing about the system. I'm glad our sneaky shiner got away scot-free. A former health sciences lecturer and her husband were arrested for keeping a Polish immigrant to the UK as a slave, locked up in their garden shed for 4 years, making him do renovations on their house. I'm a research fellow at the University of Exeter. We recently had all of our office bins removed as part of a new policy to try and improve recycling. Got lots of mass emails replying with tons of sass and annoyance. One professor just replied, "What next? Do you expect us to drive to the local skip?" To be honest, I just thought it was really annoying not having a bin in our shared office. The worst part is, now everyone brings their own plastic bags to use as temporary bins for the day, and then we end up having tons of people trying to get them into one bin that's shared by the floor. I worked for the maintenance department one summer while in college and got exposed to a lot of the drama in that department. The highlights included the school deciding that they didn't want to deal with the union anymore, so they started hiring for all the non-teaching positions as temps and then firing them after 6 months and rehiring them 30 days later. This was done because temps didn't have to be union, and also because once a large enough percentage of employees were non-union, they could start hiring non-union employees on a permanent basis. Also, the entire third shift cleaning crew, except the team lead, was made up of people with disciplinary issues. This included a man who had been caught multiple times stealing underwear and setting up cameras in the girls' showers. He was a gross old prevert. None of this was ever told to the students, by the way. The head of facilities and planning knew this was an issue and just did checks on all the bathrooms in the building that this guy cleaned once or twice a month. I worked at a large university, and right before I started, the long-time dean of the school went on sabbatical. I didn't think anything of it until 2 months later when I found out that the university forced him to take time off because he blew almost all of the school's budget on fancy dinners with donors. We're talking like more than $1,000 on alcohol-heavy meals. He showed up to official university events high off white snow and kept a second admin assistant as essentially his indentured mistress. He had a private bathroom with a shower installed in his office. He sent the school into a major budget crisis and was a PR disaster waiting to happen. It was a huge mess. The acting dean who stepped in got a lot of crap for how much damage control she had to do. Ultimately, this guy returned a few years later just as a part-time faculty member. But still, totally wild. One of our male English professors was being stalked by a female student to the point he had to get a restraining order against her. The only reason my class knew was because she saw him in the hallway, entered our classroom, and made a huge scene the first day of class, and security had to be called to make her leave. After that, the door was always locked for that class, and whoever was in the back row were scouters to let in late students. He also had to cancel class to go to court for the situation at least once. In the English department, one of the professors got arrested for domestic attacks, divorced his wife, then got another English professor pregnant and eventually married her. To clarify, the husband and the original wife were both professors. He had an affair with another English professor. The wife found out and there was a major fight, the cops were called, He was arrested for DV, but I believe the charges were dropped. He filed for divorce, moved in with the other professor, got her preggers, and then he and the ex were still fighting over child support and alimony. When I left, they all saw each other regularly at department meetings. It was super awkward. I was the pregnant professor's teacher assistant, but I was definitely team original wife. 2 professors arrested for running a crystal lab, one for unaliving his wife with lab supplies, and another one stepping down quietly for embezzlement. And that's how we replaced half of our chemistry department in a year. I'm noticing a trend between chemistry and murder in this. We're insane. I saw an email a few weeks ago that a graduate student out west was trying to poison his roommate with thallium. We found a bunch of unmarked jars of cyanide while cleaning out the chemistry closet one semester. They were stashed way in the back, just jars with zero notation. Someone grabbed them, not even sure why they touched them because you never just grab something unmarked in a chemistry closet, and he was carrying one too many and dropped one on the ground. A few people nearby started throwing up. The chemistry professor immediately screamed for everyone to get out and forced them to the eyewash station and had them all take their outer clothing layers off. She was across the room but had a really good nose and smelled the cyanide immediately. So that was fun. Not sure who'd been stocking unmarked cyanide or why, but someone had quite a hidden stash. Oh boy. Apparently the chemistry department of any given institution is just one bad day away from going on a rampage and burning it all down, whether accidentally or with forethought. You've been warned, university staff and students. Grades came out. This was back in the day when they were printed. The burster, the device that cut the grade cards up into a mailable format, had torn a belt. We could not in any way get a replacement belt from the manufacturer, so we measured how long the belt needed to be, then we went to an auto parts store and looked at a lot of belts before we settled on one and bought it. It fit the burster, and we all had the grade cards mailed that night. This is so much more wholesome than the others, which are like, after the dust settled, 2 were dead, the widow was pregnant, and all who remained had restraining orders. We fixed a mechanical problem. What a humdinger. We busted out the good rice crackers that night, I tell you. When I was going through my PhD program, a buddy of mine had his professor die on him. Young guy in his 40s, got hit by a car, boom. The not-so-fun fact was when a professor dies, their grants go away. If a grad student is on the verge of finishing, like just writing up their results, they can sometimes hop to another lab and get by. My friend, however, was only in his 2nd year. He had to start over with a new project in a new lab. Essentially lost 2 years of his life on a project that yielded absolutely nothing. Woo! Grad school. So uplifting. In our chemistry department a few years back, a grad student who was failing started poisoning another grad student they worked with closely by putting carcinogens in their food and drinks. Colorless, odorless, flavorless, thanks to his chemistry knowledge. He was eventually caught, and I'm not sure what happened to him. Thrown out for sure, perhaps arrested. Another year, a grad student pushed another student down a flight of steps to try to kill them. Chemists are crazy. A prominent professor was sleeping with his students. Actually, he met his wife that way and then had a huge issue with dating other students after getting married. Lawsuits were threatened, he resigned and moved 3,000 miles away very quickly. No news, no public info released, it was all just known through the grapevine of staff. One of the biology professors allegedly did this too while he was married. Eventually got one of the grad students pregnant and ended up leaving his wife and kids to marry the grad student. That somehow absolved him of any misconduct because they were in a legal relationship, instead of being in a teacher-student type dynamic. Other than feeling bad for the professor's old family, I felt particularly bad for the grad student's fiancé, who had given up everything and moved halfway across the country to be with her in the first place. He ended up, understandably, getting depressed and ended up taking a leave of absence from his own studies before supposedly moving home. Our heads of department or course directors would purposely keep dragging students, dragging is the act of pulling a student through their studies, even though the students would fail most classes. They'd purposely grade the student just above a pass even though the content of work was astonishingly bad, because if they left or dropped out it'd look bad on course stats and dropout rate, not to mention the university not getting the student loan money. From there, of course, statistics would be ridiculously high for that particular degree, so they'd then sell this to prospective students and parents. This is currently still going on. Oh, my source, you ask? I'm a lecturer at a university, and yes, it disgusts me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel.
The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A professor was hired to start a research center, got paid a lot of money and came in with tenure. He was frickin' weird to begin with, but as time went on, it became apparent that he wasted all the funds intended for starting the center because nothing was happening but the accounts were diminishing. The whistleblower hotline was provided with a bunch of data that strongly suggested he was funneling a lot of the cash to a company owned in part by his brother, in addition to a lot of blatant and casual misuse of funds, like buying personal and convenience stuff for himself and the staff. Things started heating up and they called him for a hearing about it. The very next day, we found an indignant letter announcing his resignation and accusing the entire department and college of unethical behavior slipped under the door. He skipped out in the middle of the night, leaving a big pile of deliberately damaged equipment in his office. The university didn't pursue him. I believe it was because they were in the middle of a scandal involving faculty and students in another department and just didn't want to hear about it. Students were completely unaware. I think anyone who's worked in a university can tell you about the normal infighting between factions, character assassination carried out in formal language at review, promotion, tenure committee meetings, grad student poaching, running crying to the dean, among many other things. It used to be said of politics on the university campus that it was the worst of all kinds of politics because the stakes were so small. Quote from Charles Frankel. Oh, and I work at a state university, he's absolutely right. Yeah, as someone with half a master's degree who dropped out, I can tell you that even with my limited insight, there is nobody pettier than higher-level students and faculty. My goodness, it gets vicious in universities. My professor for grad school had his lab raided by the FBI. This happened long before I joined. Apparently, one of his first or second class of grad students in the 80s or 90s decided that they wanted to use lab resources to brew some crystal. Very easy to do with the equipment we have. From what I'm told, this student would stay late in the lab after others had left to get this done. In Breaking Bad style, he fences his substances to some distributor and thought that was the end of it. The purity of his substances was enough that they were able to trace it back from the streets to him and the lab. A sting operation shut down the lab while the dust settled, and my professor was cleared of all wrongdoing since none of this was under his direct control, and all campus resources were being misused by the student. The State Intelligence Bureau told the professor that it was the largest and purest operation they'd seen in the state at this time. I think students would be surprised just how much drama happens. I'm talking everything from major drama like lawsuits that universities have kept quiet, or EO complaints to colleagues whining at each other because one thought the other rolled her eyes at the other one. I just went to a faculty meeting that was so tense and angry that I legitimately wanted to leave the room, and it was over a small wording difference of opinion in a policy that literally doesn't matter, because it's departmental and not university-wide, so it's going to get struck down anyway. Anyway, sometimes I'm happy to go to class or meet students in my office because that's the fun part of the job, and it's usually drama-free until the last week of classes when everyone starts hustling for a higher grade. At my university, it's currently that the head of one of our research institutes and a few of his colleagues somehow awarded themselves about $1 million US each as a bonus. In my country, it takes about 70 years of working on average salary to get that money. Also, the same professor possibly forged some data and paper 10 years ago. Who knows how it's going to end, but I'm sure more dirt is being pulled on other people as well. I work at a college in the Midwest. A few years ago, our president very quickly resigned. It turns out his son was growing green herb in their basement and was selling out of their house. Whether the president knew or not is still being debated, but he resigned. Two professors in my department had been best of friends for over a decade and had a huge personal falling out. They couldn't even be in the same room together, which made the department meetings awkward or impossible. Both of them started recruiting allies at the department and basically split it down the middle. It got so bad that a committee of faculty from other departments was convened to interview every faculty member and decide the fate of the entire department. One of the proposed options was shutting down the entire major. I had tenure at the time, but tenure doesn't protect you if your department no longer exists. There is a loophole in the rules that states that if you have tenure and your department dissolves, you can keep your job if another department will absorb you. I met with 3 other departments and all 3 agreed to absorb me if I was cut loose. I was the debate coach, so the departments were willing to absorb me to keep the debate team running.
Most of my colleagues didn't have that leverage. Once 90% of the faculty realized the possibility of joblessness, everyone decided to play nice. Finally. I had an advanced calculus teacher who'd come into class out of his mind on green herb. He'd write down equations on the board from a book, and about 15 to 20 minutes in, he'd invariably excuse himself and take a bathroom break. He'd then return, having clearly taken a drag of white snow, and proceed to solve all equations in less than 5 minutes, and non-stop monologued about the topic for another 5, then dismissed the class and stormed out. Invariably if you actually understood or not. Most students seemed physically stunned and dazed by the whole process. I don't know whether he was a frickin' genius or a deranged substance fiend, but I studied in a big university at the time, and recently I heard he was made head teacher of the math department. So I don't know what to think. I've had professors both in undergrad and grad school that would regularly get high during class. Not before, but during. Undergrad professor was a journalism professor, and pretty chill among a department of hard-drinking, old-school J. Jonah Jameson types. Except the class was a disorganized mess, and I don't think I actually learned anything. I was also a senior and didn't care. He had an odd habit of using brand names to refer to things, the way that you'd say Band-Aid or Kleenex, in ways that you wouldn't normally, and mispronouncing them. Put the memory card into the voice recorder, thus became, pop your scan disk into the TAD scan. Grad professor was clearly going through some tough crap outside of class. I'd had him for a different class the year before, and he was normal then. It was a 4-hour design class with a lot of hands-on instruction, and then he'd come in half an hour late, do some one-on-one talks, then announce conspicuously, I'm going to the bathroom, and leave for another half hour. Come back, and he'd sit in the corner playing Donna Summer on his laptop for the rest of the class. I think professors seem like a bunch of people that probably have an above-average concentration of functioning addicts in their rank, mostly alcoholics. And they're eccentric to begin with, so while this is surprisingly upfront of the guy, it's not surprising otherwise. A few years ago, an adjunct lecturer found out his contract wasn't being renewed. He went wee-wee in the corner of his office before turning in his keys. It took a lot of time and a lot of cleaning, along with a new carpet, to get rid of that smell. I was a professional assistant to the Italian department, and one of my favorite professors did a showing of a very famous Italian film, Swept Away, on the weekend. This was an outside-of-class activity, which no one was required to attend, at a college with college-age students. Just we don't have time to watch this in class, so we'll watch it over the weekend in the auditorium. The movie in question would be considered controversial by American standards. By Italian film standards, it's also controversial, but considered a pretty important film for anyone studying film. It deals with some pretty intense issues involving dynamics between men and women, wealthy and poor, as well as, depending on your interpretation, a unspeakable act scene. I was working in the department when we did this movie showing, so I got a front row view of it blowing up. Apparently some freshmen, who were 18 years old, attended the screening and complained to their parents, who then complained to the school in turn. The school decided the best option was to fire my professor. The Italian department went to bat for him, reminding the school that adult students attended that screening voluntarily. The school knew they couldn't get away with firing him specifically for that, so at the end of the quarter they revoked his contract renewal. He was supposed to come back the next year. They did this for lifestyle choices that conflict with university standards. Dumb move. I don't know who on the university's legal team wrote it that way, but they should be fired. The professor in question was Pakistani and openly gay, living with his husband. As far as I understand it, he took their butts to court for discriminatory dismissal. They settled out of court for an unknown sum, but it was enough that my professor and his husband moved to Italy, where he now works at a university there and is very happy. No one outside of the Italian department knew what happened. Professor was there one quarter and gone the next, with no warning whatsoever. I used to be a custodian at a prominent university, and one of the teacher assistants in the art department would routinely leave her studio a pigsty and then assured her students, not to sweat the mess, we're just giving the janitor something to do. A number of students complained about her sense of entitlement, and she was rejected for a professorship for calling me a janitor instead of the proper nomenclature, custodian. Grad students are treated like trash. We're cheap labor, so the tenured professors can keep publishing without doing anything, and the professors looking for tenure can get the publications they need. Basically, the entire publish or perish culture in academia is really toxic. Unless you get lucky with a nice advisor, you're screwed. Also, university administration cares nothing for graduate students. At my school, our president announced a cash appreciation gift to every staff person making under a certain amount. Every graduate student on campus thought that included them as well, because according to every logical person, we're staff eligible for benefits and we work full-time. Nope, we're only students when it's convenient for the university and makes their numbers look good, and we're considered staff only because we're getting paid barely above the poverty line. At least I get health insurance, I guess? Oh, and my source, grad student who was once all bright-eyed and excited about academia, but it's a toxic place. Apparently, there were quite a few rich kids who didn't study, go to class, contribute, or maintain a GPA above a 3.0, whose parents shockingly paid for them to get into those schools. Say it isn't so! Academia sometimes draws ridiculous people. I had a dean once who caused so much turmoil so often by simply denying objective reality when it didn't suit her. I remember spearheading a project to repurpose a section of our building. I got the plans and she refused to believe the blueprints on square footage. So I measured it myself. She pretended it wasn't the case, that it wasn't large enough to accommodate its new purpose, but according to her, it was because in her mind it was 30% larger. I went over her head and ended up in meetings with higher administration, trying to get them to understand. They all took her side. She proceeded to make my life hell for the remainder of my time at the university. It's often speculated or rumored that university professors are sometimes attracted to their students. But it can work the other way, as was the case with me when I was teaching music history. One female student sat as close as she could get, followed me around and was always doing extra things to win favor, to the point where it became obvious to her peers. Rather than embarrass this student by discussing it with her directly, or fellow staff members and the dean, I patiently wound her down gradually over time until she eventually got the idea that nothing would come of it. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.